on the... All right, good evening. Welcome to Tuesday, November 21st. Calling to order our 5:30 start time. I'll have our city clerk do our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Ratuja Indapure.
Here.
Councilmember Roshino Farrell.
Here.
Thank you. All are present. Back to you, Mayor Clark.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Lamb, can you lead us in the pledge, please? Great, thank you. I will do our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. All right, first up, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All righty, and now we have public comment. We'll start within the room. Pamela?
Pamela Randolph, City of Sammamish. Tonight you will be evaluating whether or not to amend the Town Center Suburbia Plan for enhanced diversity and affordability in housing, which includes a contract supplemental agreement that will increase the budget by $436,749. There are two challenges that I see. One is that the City Council adopted the growth targets by resolution of 2,100 affordable units. According to experts, it takes 3 market rate homes to build one affordable home. So the number of housing units we would need to be addressing is closer to 8,400. Why does the City Council continue to fund study after study, not complete projects that were required to support the study's outcome, and have made no real progress toward our commitments? The second challenge is that this is a drain on city finances. It was welcome to see that some of the more onerous proposals will be phased in over time. But be clear, the City Council is still hiding behind a citizens panel who has not evaluated spending or contracts and were given only options to rank. With this in mind, I would like to share an idea in hopes that someone on the City Council will follow up with this idea. I would like to see the City Council reevaluate the contract with Central Washington State University, which is up for renewal in 2025. The property is significantly underutilized throughout the year and has the capacity to support our local entrepreneurs, youth, seniors, Central Washington State University, and our local 501c3 repertory group. The senior programming group is being displaced this year and needs a new space. The space would be open during the days during the day, and we can keep Sammamish dollars in Sammamish by utilizing the stage, gym, and our entrepreneurs can utilize the office space through hourly rentals and perhaps have lunch downtown. I wouldn't imagine they would want a WeWorks in Sammamish, but a low-cost option for office space would be beneficial. We would need someone to coordinate the scheduling and manage the contract, but since the city already pays for custodial services and landscaping, the cost would be minimal. Perhaps some seniors would want a part-time job. This would allow for the city to develop a mentorship program between our youth, DECA clubs, Running Start, and our entrepreneurs. It would open up Beaver Lake Lodge for additional rental space. Those who have heard about the idea seem to like it. Perhaps lower the 6% utility tax that is slated for 2026. I would be happy to share the names if possible. In the end, I'm concerned that the growth targets that were adopted were misguided and conflicts with other environmental goals the city has adopted. But I guess we'll have to wait for another environmental impact statement to be completed that won't address prior commitments that were made. While the town center plan has promise for our city, we need to ensure that we can ultimately
Thank
live
you.
with the outcome and our resources are not drained. Thank you.
Celia?
Celia Wu, Sammamish. Good evening, council members, Mayor Clark. On page 15 of the Rules of Procedure for the City Council, in the section responding to public comments, it does say that you may direct staff to follow up if an administrative answer or problem resolution is required. Last week, after I made my second public comment, you all heard the city attorney commit to contacting my attorney within a day or two. That was last Wednesday, and my attorney has not been contacted. My attorney's letter documents, with evidence, the retaliatory, illicit, and discriminatory actions by the city manager. Retaliatory in that the city manager placed me on 2 weeks unpaid suspension and tried to bully me into signing a last chance agreement because my colleague and I, both women of color, expressed concerns to HR about his hostility towards us. The city manager forced us out, and we've both found employment elsewhere. Illicit in that after our complaint, he removed us from the staff list. Note that common practice is to put the person being investigated on leave, not the other way around, as happened to us. Illicit in that he denied my request for a hearing as guaranteed in your employee manual. Illicit in that he suspended me for something I didn't do. I followed the recommendation of the city attorney and did not reply publicly to the Facebook comments by former Mayor Don Gerand, former council member Jason Ritchie, and Sarah Howe Kimsey. As you will recall, I asked for help when they called for my termination for something the court evidence proved I didn't do, violated Ms. Kimsey's First Amendment rights. Illicit in that he suspended me because I did a routine function that was part of my job description. I replied privately to a journalist from the Sammamish Independent, as I've done many times before. Discriminatory in that white male employees of the city of Sammamish who were found to have actually committed violations were not treated in such an unjust and truculent manner. I didn't violate anything. I was doing my job. The city manager, however, committed violations with his retaliatory, illicit, and discriminatory actions against a 100% women of color communications team. I request that you follow the City Council's procedure of problem resolution. I am again requesting that you direct the city attorney to contact my attorney so that we can resolve the violations outlined in the letter you received on September 14th. Will you please do so?
Thank you. We do have Carrie on the line. Obviously not in the room.
Good evening, Mayor. Would you like me to clarify for the record that the city's legal counsel did send a letter to Mary Ruth Mann, Ms. Wu's attorney, and it was sent yesterday?
It was sent yesterday. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. Okay.
Thank you, Carrie.
I was not informed that I spoke to her yesterday, and she said that she didn't receive anything. So
Thank you.
okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Vidita?
Ms. Wu.
Hi, my name is Vidita Dwivedi. I'm a grade 8 student at IMS. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sammamish Youth Board. The City of Sammamish states in its vision for Sammamish the desire that the people of Sammamish are actively involved in decision making. As of the 2020 census, almost 30% of the population in Sammamish consists of youth under 18. However, the youth have few opportunities for representation on the city level apart from serving on the SYB. Accordingly, to promote civic engagement and the political voice of the youth, we ask that the council allot at least one seat on each advisory board and commission for a member of the youth board and/or a student at a local high school. The youth of Sammamish possess incredible talent and desire to serve. Many students at Eastlake, Skyline, Eastside Catholic, and Tesla STEM have received national and international acclaim for their work in STEM, arts, and athletics. Students also lead service projects like Hope Fest and supply drives that benefit many people in our community. Harnessing the power of the youth in city government will be rewarding. The Climate Action Plan Group, CAG, demonstrates the powerful impact youth can have in the city government. From June to August of 2023, following years of youth-led negotiation, the city assembled the CAG with youth representatives from the SYB and local high schools. These representatives pitched ideas about transportation and other relevant topics and proposed pragmatic, youth-related solutions to climate change. In neighboring cities, many commissions and boards are structured with youth representation with great success. Certain examples of such boards include Issaquah's Arts and Human Services Commissions, Issaquah's Equity and Environmental Boards, Redmond Arts and Human Services, and Environmental Sustainability and Parks and Trails Commissions. These commissions and advisory boards have maintained youth membership for many years. Understanding concerns toward time commitment, we request that the city consider creating at least one additional one-year term youth member position, voting or non-voting, on every advisory board and commission. This member will count towards quorum requirements and will contribute to the decision-making process by providing a youth perspective. We would like to equally note soon-to-be Councilmember Gupta for making youth representation a key section of his campaign and for his support. We thank you for your consideration. With a unanimous vote, the Sammamish Youth Board.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else that did not get a chance to sign up? Okay, we will head to online comments.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. For attendees who are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9, and I will unmute the callers in the order they've raised their hands. You'll have 3 minutes to provide comment. Please start your comment by stating your name and the city you live in for the record. I'll now unmute the first caller.
Hi there. My name is Jack Bates. I live in Issaquah, and I work for Friends of the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery. I'm here just to tell you guys a few of our stats in representing Sammamish groups. We have had more than 500 students from Sammamish on either a tour or an in-class presentation with fish. We, or the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery, I should say, not necessarily fish, have been able to stock 2,198 rainbow trout into Beaver Lake for recreational fishing. And I would like to share a letter from one of these students from Sammamish. Dear Salmon, thank you very much for letting me feed you. I know you cannot read, so please let one person read this for you. Sincerely, Chloe. The students who are able to come to the hatchery have a wonderful experience. Their chaperones and teachers are able to learn and report that it is a very impactful learning opportunity for the students. The City of Sammamish provides funding for fish. We thank you for that and hope for continued support in the future. Thank you all for your time. Happy holidays.
Thanks so much.
And we do not have any other online callers.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we have executive session pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)I. Council may take action, and it looks like to start we will have 15 minutes. So let's do back at 6. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Councilmember Napure?
I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a settlement agreement with Puget Sound Energy, consistent with the recommendations of the city's outside counsel.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All righty, thank you. Next up, I will entertain a motion for the consent calendar unless anyone wants to pull anything.
So moved. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All righty. So next up, Councilmember Napure. Obviously, we couldn't just let you leave silent. Councilmember O'Farrell, I'm going to pass it to you first. Do you remember what you're doing? Okay. Yeah, but where are they? One moment. Your email. Oh, I think it's just, oh no, it's R. Yeah. All right, sorry, we're trying to recognize a council member, but I think this is kind of par for the course. Yeah. Is that my email address? Yeah, I guess I will start. Did you find it? Yeah, oh, here we go. Nice, Deputy Mayor Lamb. Oh, yeah, I could have just done that. It was open on mine. Okay, Councilmember O'Farrell.
Just like to keep you waiting, Rituja. You know, that's just really, that was all part of the plan. I want you to know that that was rehearsed. Right. So tonight we thank Councilmember Rituja Indupre for her dedicated service to the city of Sammamish, as this is her final meeting on council. Councilmember Indupre's commitment to Sammamish is evident in her extensive involvement in the community, such as serving as a PTSA board member, Girl Scout leader, YMCA board member, and recreational soccer coach. From her role as a planning commissioner to her time on the city council, she has consistently worked to ensure all voices are heard. City Council member Indupre brings over 20 years of professional experience in the business and technology sector, managing complex projects and leading diverse teams. Her technology and project management background have been invaluable in addressing our city's evolving needs and priorities. Council member Indupre has consistently emphasised protecting our environment and green spaces. Her support of the Transfer Development Rights Programme reflects a dedication to responsible growth while conserving critical areas. Councilmember Indupre recognises the need of diverse housing options in Sammamish and has actively supported strategies to increase housing types and affordability. Her engagement with the Housing Action Plan and Implementation Grant demonstrates a forward-thinking approach. Councilmember Indupre has shown a thoughtful approach to city finances, emphasising the importance of exploring diverse revenue streams. Her suggestions, including grants for community activities, public-private partnerships and cultural events, showcase innovative thinking for the financial well-being of Sammamish. As Councilmember Indupre concludes her tenure, we express our deepest gratitude for her unwavering commitment to the city of Sammamish. Her leadership, dedication, and collaborative spirit has contributed significantly to making Sammamish a resident, inclusive, and thriving community. On behalf of the City of Sammamish and the entire community, we sincerely thank Councilmember Indupre for her outstanding service. We wish her continued success in her future endeavours.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So obviously next, I think we'll start the roasting session. If anyone would like to start. No, but please, if anyone has comments or remarks, Councilmember Howe.
It just isn't a good council meeting unless I started off, don't you think? Ratuja, it has been an honor, a privilege, and a joy to have you on this council. You have been a gift to all of us and to the residents you serve, which you have done admirably, and you've always done. You just never stop. You never stop. And it's because your heart is in the right place and your brain is always working. So I appreciate you very much. And I know you from a different point of view because I've run for office with you twice. And to have you here is just a testament to karma and the way things should work. I've learned a ton from you, and I will continue to do so. And I look forward to what happens next. And you could write a book about like me and a character. You could name it Karen is fine, really.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
We were very fortunate to have you on Council, Ratuja, and I very much appreciated all the insight and the perspective that you brought to all our council issues. And you always did it very calmly and with such grace. And I've always appreciated your approach to that. So thank you for serving on council, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you around the city.
Councilmember Stewart.
I'm only going to be able to get out, thank you. So I'm just going to say thank you, and our time together was just too short.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I definitely hope to make my name on that best friends list. That's my new goal. I really appreciate you putting out your name again. I would say time and time again. I'm so glad that you did it for the final time. It's been a year and a half. It's been a really good year and a half. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your service. I know you'll probably be back on something soon. Always volunteering, always doing something. So thank you. Councilmember O'Farrell.
I know I already spoke, but I just have to say, you and I met before Planning Commission, but we served together in Planning Commission for over 3 years, and then on the YMCA board, and we've become friends. And it's just been wonderful to know you. I feel I'm a better person for knowing you. I hope we'll always be in each other's lives. And thank you, Ratuja, for serving with us. We're all the better for it, and miss you greatly. But I'm sure you won't be able to get rid of me that quickly, so I'm sure I'll find you. But thank you, Ratuja, so much. You did a fabulous job. Thank you.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, hey, Ratuja, thanks for serving the community first and the residents, and then all the assists that you've given to this council. It's much appreciated, and you'll definitely be missed. Thanks.
Scott, would you like to end us?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Napoli, we had a great conversation a little bit ago in our last one-on-one. I just want to say thank you for your service and for your thoughtful presence on council. I think it was very much appreciated. And as I told you, you can run, but you can't hide. We will suck you into something. So I really appreciate those that are willing to put out their personal time to be a part of the community and serve the community. And you've done that admirably. And we hope to tap you again in the future to do some variation of that. So thank you so much. And before we break, Mayor, I think we'd like to do a final picture. And then I do want to note that Councilmember Indapore got to literally take her picture off the wall to take it home. So as a parting souvenir. But from the staff, from all the staff, I'd like to say thank you. You've been fantastic to work with.
Okay. All right, and thank you, staff, for doing the flowers and the plaque and everything. I cannot take credit for that. All righty, Councilmember Howe, we have a proclamation for Small Business Saturday.
Small Business Saturday, whereas Small Business Saturday is an annual event that was created to encourage consumers to shop locally, in person, and online as a way to support and celebrate small businesses and all they do for the communities. And whereas the City of Sammamish celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and the community, and according to the United States Small Business Administration, small businesses have added over 12.9 million jobs in the last 25 years, which is about 2/3 of the jobs added to the economy. And whereas 99.9% of businesses across the U.S. are small businesses, and there are 33.2 million small businesses across America, and whereas small businesses employ 61.7 million workers, which is 45.4, why the numbers, percent of all U.S. employees, showing just how vital the growth of small businesses is with a nation that depends heavily on them for employment. And whereas 97% of Small Business Saturday shoppers recognize the impact they can make by shopping small, and 85% of them also encourage friends and family to do so too. And whereas nearly 6 in 10 holiday shoppers participated in Small Business Saturday in 2022, with 72% of shoppers strongly agreeing to continue to shop small because of the impact it has on their local community. And whereas Sammamish supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, Kaylee Clark, Mayor of Sammamish, on behalf of Sammamish City Council, does hereby proclaim November 25th, 2023 as Small Business Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So next up, we do have continuation of our public hearings. I believe the 1% increase has been closed and the other one has remained open. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Awesome. All right. So approval, this is the, final action potentially for levying of regular property taxes for 2024, including the allowable 1% increase. And are you taking this, Scott, or Chris?
Yes, Mayor, I'm happy to take it. There is no additional presentation, as this is just essentially for council action to choose whether or not to take the 1%.
All right, got it. And as we recall from last week already, the 1% we did discuss last year when we obviously passed the budget. So I'm going to open it up to council if there are any other further questions, remarks, a motion, anything. I'm not seeing anything yet. All right, Deputy Mayor Lamb.
I motion to adopt the 2023 property tax levy ordinance.
I second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
No, we adopted it, or rather, we discussed it when we adopted the budget, and I'm totally fine with it.
All right, great. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I know we've got some deadlines coming up here for this property tax levy, but I'm not totally comfortable with all the budget numbers. I think our actuals for expenditures are going to come in quite a bit lower than what we had budgeted for. And so, given where we are, I'm not sure we need to take this at the moment, right? We're going to reduce our expenses by, hopefully, at least $3 million from 2023, and I think that's a low number. I think the 2023 actuals will actually come in quite a bit less than that, and I think this levy raises, is it a couple $100,000? Is it like two something?
It's slightly under 300,000.
Yeah. So I think that our actuals are going to come in much less than that. So I don't think we need to take this at the time. I think we should hold on to that. We have a lot of capital expenditures coming up, and I'd like to be able to reserve whatever capacity we might have to be able to address some of those large capital projects as we move into next year, which I think all of that's going to come back in our regular budgeting process. So just something to think about.
All right, thank you. Motion on the floor is to approve ordinance 2023-562. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, 6-1, that ordinance is approved. And for the next, I will close the public hearing for the ordinance amending the budget, biennial budget. Ordinance 2023-563 is now closed. And Scott, did you have anything else on that one, or kind of same?
Mayor, I'm happy to give a recap if that's helpful. Okay, Mike, if you would.
Actually, Mike, yeah, if you'll give that recap. No.
Well, Mike runs the presentation. So, Council, bear with. This is just a high-level overview about the proposed mid-biennial budget adjustments. And just for a quick review, the biennial budget was adopted in fall of 2022, so a year ago. Revenue and expenditure figures were created with the best estimate at that point in time. We have better estimates now on both 2023 and 2024 revenues and expenditures. And as you know, the law requires mid-biennial review, but it is not, you're just required to review. You're not required to take any action. So what we looked at is right-sizing the 2024 budget and resetting the base budget going forward. And I want to just reiterate for all that is spending authority. The budget is in essence spending authority, and that it's lowering that spending authority so that when as we move into the next biennial budget process, we'll be starting with a lower spending base than we had going into this biennial budget process. So just for clarification on what that is. We also took a look at right-sizing our revenues and the revenue forecast. Council will recall from the October 8th presentation on the general fund that interest came in higher than anticipated, and so we have adjusted the budget to reflect that higher interest, and we are in 2024 we're expecting also some higher interest to come in. And then we have started the beginning of additional refinements culminating in the next biennial budget process for how we budget. And part of that is the higher strategic reserve so that we budget much closer to actual, so that if we get to a point where we need additional spending authority and there is revenue available, we would come to council at that point in time. So it's probably more touches moving forward, and that's a process we'll take up in the next year. And when we bring back the biennial budget for next time, you will definitely see some changes on how we do that. So this is step one in taking that action. So October 10th council meeting. Recall we went into the adopted budget, showed taking $12 million, almost $13 million out of fund balance to balance the budget. Now I want to be clear, almost $8 million of that was for Fire Station 82. That's a capital transfer. It's a one-time transfer. And so the difference was slightly over $5 million. We have made adjustments to the mid-biennial budget. The difference gets us to about $200,000 in the positive at the end of the biennium, as opposed to taking money out of fund balance. We'll be putting a little bit back in. And again, these are projections through the end of the biennium. The next step was this lays it out. So we took reductions in slightly over $1 million. We right-sized the police budget. There was a IT interfund transfer, which is a fancy way of saying we thought we needed more in our IT fund, and it turns out we did not. So that goes back into the general fund. We had slightly lower medical premium costs, which is always a positive. And on the flip side, we increased the budget for legal services to account for our litigation budget. So the total adjustment is $2.4 million roughly, and that equates to about a 4% reduction in spending to the general fund. So that's our spending cap. And then at the November 8th council meeting, we walked through all the rest of the funds because I want to remind council budgets at the fund level. And so that's why these showed up at fund dollar amounts at the end of the day. So this is all the rest of the funds. Some of these are capital funds. Some of these are operating funds, like surface water management has both an operating and a capital fund. But those are self-contained in what we call enterprise funds. The money can only be spent on things for surface water management, so dollars come in and are spent all within that little bubble, if you will. So the total to that is a positive increase of $2.66 million across all those capital and operating budgets that are separate from the general fund. So to make the distinction, the general fund is what funds are overall our day-to-day operations, and these other funds are more capital and direct specific funding. So with those proposed changes in the budget, that actually pushes out our crossover point for when we will cross over our reserve fund line from 2027 and a half or so to 2030 and a half or so. So 3 years out. But I want to be clear about this. This assumes that all of the money in fund balance right now is held for just filling in the budget over that time period. So bridging the gap between revenues that we bring in and expenses over time. And we will talk more about this in the financial sustainability plan presentation later this evening. But the positive side is we have shifted that out for 3 years, assuming no other action is taken by council or a future council. Those lines would cross over in 2030. So that's the net result of that. And that is the end of the quick reminder presentation regarding the budget.
Great, thank you. Councilmember O'Farrell.
Scott, I wonder, when you say no other action is taken by council, could you just kind of clarify what you mean by that?
Sure, it's a precursor to if council decides to not add either down the road, either reduce costs to account for that or increase revenues. Either of those would be considered a corrective action or some combination of both. And this will lead into the conversation about the fiscal sustainability plan, about what actions council might recommend a future council take to alleviate that that funding gap issue down the road.
All right, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah. So thanks, Scott, and I want to thank you and all the staff. I know budgeting, at least at my day job, takes up a fairly significant amount of time. And so I appreciate all the work that was put into this. Unfortunately, we didn't get some of this detail until just a couple of hours ago in terms of the reductions to the budget. And I think that graph also includes a potential adjustment to 2023. One of the questions that I do have is, can you just clarify, since it's a biennium budget, which is a 2-year budget, and it is the overall spending authority, why we can't reduce that spending authority by by larger amounts to account for things that we aren't going to spend for in 2023? I'm a little bit confused by that.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. I'd like to ask Chris Giannini if she wouldn't mind coming up and addressing that piece. Chris Giannini is our Deputy Finance Director.
Is that on? Okay. Okay, my reading of the RCW is for the personnel costs. We are required, and I'll read right out of the RCW language, it's so exciting. The expenditures section shall further set forth separately the salary or salary range for each office, position, or job classification, together with the title or position designation thereof. So I read that to mean we have to budget for every position that the council has approved. We are allowed to adjust the biennial budget under another RCW, but I don't believe we're allowed to not budget for personnel costs, because that was in the original budget, is we must budget for the people that are the positions that council has approved. So
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
where we get you can't cut the 23 budget for the personnel costs. I don't believe it would be good practice to cut the 23 budget, because when we do our annual financial report, which is audited, we need to report the original budget, the amended budget, why it was changed. And the annual financial report will show the actual expenditures compared to the budget. So that is where you would see the difference between actual and budget. So we may, not promise, may run into an issue with the auditor if we cut the budget to match what we think the actual expenditures are going to be for 2023 at the end of 2023.
So that leads me to my next question, which is based on just looking at, I think the last financial management report we had was for September, the end of September. For the expenditures that we aren't going to spend in 2023, if we don't want to adjust the budget, they're still in the biennium budget. So technically you still have that spending authority, and we're still reserving that money, and we're still putting it in our reserve. But by all accounts, we're never going to spend that, or if we do, we should make a different decision, because we're not going to spend it on the things they were budgeted for. How do we make sure that all of that money stays in there and doesn't get spent on something else?
Councilmember Stewart, I appreciate the question. I think that's where the actual budget and reducing the budget, that's our spending authority. So that's where we are coming in and saying, reduce the spending authority so that, and then if there are things that we need to spend dollars on, we would come to council and say, we recommend that you spend dollars on this moving forward. I appreciate and I understand what you're saying. I think the challenge is, in terms of the monthly reporting, is that those are just bills that have come in, not bills that we've encumbered that are still waiting to come in. And we won't know that until, Chris, it takes a couple of months after the roll of the year before we get all of those actually in.
We'll be lucky to get them by the end of February.
Totally get it. I mean, I understand that, like, it's a snapshot in time. Okay, so one of the concerns that I just have, right, is that, and I appreciate that, like, we got to leave it there, but we need to have a good accounting of what that is, because I think by most accounts it's going to be somewhere between, $4 and probably $8 million. And I just want to make sure that we know where that's sort of sitting, and that if we do need to spend it on something else, we can certainly move that forward from that thing, although that still seems like, if we can't touch the budget, I don't know. It seems a little bit odd that we're going to leave a bunch of money and have to account for it, which is why I'm uncomfortable raising taxes when we have the money sitting there. In terms of the cutting of the 2024 budget, again, we're going to cut things in 2024. And from the information we got, it could cause some delays, or it could push some things out or reduce some levels of service. I'd like to understand all of that before we make the mid-buy adjustment. I absolutely want to be able to adjust that budget down. I think it's important that we do, and that we get a tighter hold on that, and we have those additional touch points. But I think it's also really important that we're able to communicate to the community, if we are going to cut levels of service, what those things are that we're proposing to cut with that, and we make those decisions accordingly. So I don't know if that's something, Scott, that we can get a summary of that before we have to make a decision on how much we want to reduce the mid-buy by. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Stewart. And I would say, the document that you got this afternoon was our planning level document, and you asked for very detailed information. Our commitment to all of you with the 2% cut was that we were not reducing levels of service, and that we would figure out on our end how to make that work. So while I understand what you're saying, there's also, we are managing within our budgets as we move forward to make sure that those things don't happen. Again, those were planning level when the departments were going through and looking about what they could cut and where, that those were what was put forward. And we still plan on working around those things. And if we get to a point where we can't provide a service at the same level we are now, we would obviously come to you. But that was our commitment, and that was the task for the staff, is to not reduce levels of service with the 2% reduction.
Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, and thanks for providing that level of detail, because I did have a chance to review it. Because I'd expressed a concern earlier, just that were these projects that could magically end up back on the list again or something like that, and they're clearly not. After looking at the list of the reductions and the planned cuts, they make perfect sense. I'm very comfortable with the direction. It just looks like good management, frankly. after reviewing that spreadsheet. So I'm in a different place, I think, than where Councilmember Stewart is. And just so that I'm clear, too, when we talk about ability to spend versus cash in the bank, I mean, ability to spend is a concept. From my point of thinking, it's not like it's that money can suddenly magically disappear or reappear someplace else. It's being tracked in terms of what our expenses and our revenue increases are as they come in the door. So as long as there's the tight accounting, which clearly we have, I'm comfortable with how we are designating how funds are being used and how what our go-forward strategy is.
Councilmember Trine?
Yeah, I move to approve the proposed adjustments to the city's 2023-2024 biennial budget.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any comments or discussion? Are you? Yes. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Councilmember Stewart.
So in the documents that we received, so Scott, what you're saying is that you will not be eliminating or defunding assistant planners. You are not going to reduce the lifeguards. You're not going to reduce the concerts. You're not going to discontinue website accessibility checking. All of these items are not going to be reduced based on your proposal.
That's correct.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I would actually like to take a look at that list again. That list came in very late, and I did not have an opportunity to review it in the time that I'd like to. So could this possibly come back in December?
I think we'll have to vote first. Yeah. So I know there is a motion on the floor, so my assumption is we would have to vote on it unless Councilmember Trine would withdraw. And I know we have 2 meetings left.
That's correct, Mayor.
All right, so if Councilmember Trine would not like to withdraw, we will take a vote first. So all those in favor of passing Ordinance 2023-563, the biennial mid-budget adjustment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay.
So 4 to 3. Okay, so that ordinance does pass. All right. Thank you, Chris. Are you done? Yeah. For the night? Yeah. No, I mean, I was just wondering. I was like, do you want to hang out or are we standing in between your Thanksgiving? Yeah, you can sit. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Excuse me, Mayor Clark. Can you please state the ayes and the nays for the record?
Yeah, sure. The nays are Councilmember Stewart, Deputy Mayor Lamb, Councilmember O'Farrell. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next, we are moving to unfinished business. Is David? Oh, David's here. David and Kelly and Steve. Okay. Awesome. And this is to amend the Town Center Sub-Area Plan for enhanced diversity and affordability in housing, including a contract supplemental agreement.
Good evening, City Council. For the record, my name is Kelly Hildy, and I am the Deputy Director of Community Development. Joining me tonight is David Pyle, Director of Community Development, and Steve Cecil with Framework. Steve is joining us remotely. We continue our discussion from October 3rd, where we initially outlined the preliminary scope for the supplemental EIS and the proposed amendments to the Town Center Sub-Area Plan and associated development regulations. Given the extensive background information and discussion on the benefits of the proposed scope we covered on October 3rd, tonight's presentation will focus on the pivotal issues, the detailed scope of work, and the projected timeline. For those who couldn't join us on October 3rd, I recommend watching the meeting video available on the city's website. The discussion with the City Council and Planning Commission starts at the 33-minute mark and spans roughly 2 hours. Alternatively, for a concise summary, please refer to the Q&A matrix from that session, which you'll find attached to the agenda bill for this evening. Before we get started, I would like to note that our presentation is planned to be brief-ish, so we respectfully request that any questions be saved till the end. With that said, click there. Tonight's focus is on a pivotal decision point. We seek the Council's approval for an amendment to Frameworks contract that will allow us to carry out the necessary environmental review and make strategic amendments to the Town Center Subarea Plan and its development regulations. These changes are crucial for paving the way to accommodate more diverse and affordable housing options. Let's briefly revisit the key points discussed on October 3rd. We acknowledge that since 2008, our Town Center Plan has remained largely unchanged. Now, with a third of our residential and commercial capacity reached, it's a good time to reconsider our development limits. Increasing the residential and commercial caps is necessary to effectively build more affordable housing. To ensure proposed amendments to the Town Center Plan and development regulations are well informed, we're looking at completing a supplemental EIS. Amending the Town Center Plan and development regulations would ensure alignment with the 2024 Comprehensive Plan periodic update, add future capacity for local housing needs, and enhance the city's framework for delivering affordable housing. Although this work is not required to demonstrate compliance, this is an opportunity to ensure consistency with state, regional, and local planning objectives. To offer a detailed roadmap of how we plan to accomplish this work, I'll now turn it over to Steve. He will walk us through the pivotal issues, the scope of work, and the timeline to complete all of this by the end of 2024. Steve, you are up.
Great. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I am looking forward to explaining the importance and some of the key steps to amending the Town Center Plan with a particular focus on an issue that has been widely discussed and appropriately so, creating more affordable housing and the notion of housing choice, a diversity of types, sizes, price points that everyone can benefit from at various points in their living in Sammamish. So the priority is to really look at the future needs the city has and the policy foundations that need to be confirmed to make sure the housing stock is expanded. That notion of choice is really important, and the key mechanism that's been in place to spur affordable housing production is density bonuses. But the overall approach is not to increase the by right development densities that could occur in the city center if there weren't affordable components to it, but really look at the incentives. How do we provide the opportunities for the development community to add those kinds of units without actually changing the base densities? So with that, the next set of issues really have to do with those incentives. If you look at the zoning today, the code, there's this complex interchange of different kinds and amounts of bonuses available, drawing from a set bonus pool of units to different sub areas or subzones within the town center. What we're going to do is really evaluate how effective that has been and look at various options that could expand that. For example, can TDR play a more important part? Is expanding TDR and thinking about how the regional TDR could be a component to this? The overall idea is to make sure that the bonuses that are available work, you get the behavior you want, but that they're not so overly generous. this is not an idea of giving a lot of development opportunity to folks for very few units. So getting that balance is something that our team is going to be working with your staff and with you to understand. Another key component and key issue is having businesses and services. The plan calls for a significant amount of commercial retail services within it. Demand appears to be growing. The opportunities may be here to provide the kinds of conveniently located services that we've been hearing consistently as we've been working on the master plan update. So we will be examining the opportunities to do that as well. Now, one of the keys to the town center is that you have a robust set of development standards in great detail about what the look and feel and character and overall open space, many of these different factors that make for great communities. But there's some issues that we're going to address. Some of them are removing barriers that may be inadvertent, but in the regulations that would make it more difficult to develop affordable housing. Making sure that there's a new bill that has been passed at the state legislature to make sure that if you have exterior design standards, that they be clear and objective, which is a really clear path, and that's something we'll be looking at. And to the extent that would affect low-density single-family housing units, we need to make sure that this accessory dwelling unit capacity exists appropriately within your code. So we'll be focusing on those issues. Now, the transportation and infrastructure that comes along with potentially expanding the affordable housing and housing component along with it in the commercial development needs to be balanced against both existing conditions, but make sure that we're providing for mobility, that the infrastructure will be sufficient, and setting the stage for appropriate mitigation as change and development occurs. So we'll be focusing on that and making sure that the infrastructure and transportation keep pace. Implementation is really important in all of this. You can set the policies and set the code, but streamlining the permit process and increasing the predictability. They're just a few of the forms, and in fact, a list of all the steps that a group would need to go through and work with the city and staff to get approvals. We're going to go through that and see if there's a more direct way, a clear way to streamline that. Again, following some of the encouragement from the state legislature to make the process clear, clean, and straightforward.
And Steve, I'm going to jump in here real quick. So one thing we want to make clear is that any work that we're doing to amend the plan, amend the development regulations, and to process through a supplemental environmental impact statement to identify potential impacts would apply to the future development in the town center. Anything that is currently under review, and there are a range of projects that are currently under review, would remain vested and grandfathered to those rules that are in place today. But we also see an opportunity cost that if we don't address this, we might not get the right mix of housing and the right level of affordability. So this is an opportunity for that reason. Again, it's optional, but we wanted to highlight that if we don't change anything, that the next wave of applications that come in would be following the current codes and policies that we have on the books.
So how do we get to the good answers to these issues? Well, we're going to recalibrate everything to existing conditions. If you go back to 2002 when the idea came up, or 2007, and look through how things have changed, a lot has occurred. This is not starting from where the conditions were when the plan was first finished. And as we take a look at how the different development components have occurred, the infrastructure improvements in place, the park improvements in place, the civics improvements that are in place, this is the starting point when we look forward. Much of the plans work really well in many ways, but we want to make sure that the baseline is taking into account all of those conditions, and we'll be recording those. Now, part of updating a plan and updating the code is to make sure that the environmental impacts are understood, studied, and mitigated, and that process is a requirement through the state. And we will be providing the information for supplemental EIS. There was an EIS done, and much of it's still valid, but where there's adjustments and amendments being made, we need to make sure that the benefits and mitigation is clearly understood and stated, and made sure that the public and agencies have a chance to participate in that process. So we'll end up with what's called a planned action EIS. This is not a project, a development project. It's a planned action, a policy level action, which will then come to you for eventual consideration and adoption. So as we take a look at the amendment of the plan itself, it's important to understand we're not starting from zero and reframing everything. The focus really will be largely on affordable and diverse housing, and making sure we calibrate those incentives, make the adjustments to transportation and infrastructure, set the basis for new development standards, and then set the basis for new street standards, so that the thinking behind all of this is clear and can be followed up with implementing improved standards over time. So the development regulations itself, this document that guides what can and must occur, will be amended, and there's a very extensive STC, the Sammamish Town Center segment to your development code. And as we take a look at that, we're going to make sure and walk through each one of the key elements, particularly as it relates to the housing, and make sure that it's clear and it's more effective perhaps than it has been in the past. So the process is intended is targeting 1 year with 4 incremental steps or stages. And you, the council, the community, planning commission, agencies will be involved at important milestones along this 1 year journey. This chart shows those 4 different stages. The first 3 months are going to be making sure that we check the conditions, make sure that we are clear about the issues, but then discussing and confirming what should be the focus and what are the priorities that we want this amendment to focus on and to address. There'll be opportunities for public meetings and reviews. There's a track for the Planning Commission, who will be advising you, the city council members. And what we'd like to do is, at the end of that milestone, have confirmation that the priorities we're pursuing are the right priorities. From there, the next step, we will be framing the choices, broad choices, and then more narrowly, what are the most practical choices for the different kinds of programs, approaches, goals and targets for number of human units, goals and targets for commercial and retail development. How should we think about those choices? And that's setting the stage for the draft plan and for the EIS and the draft amendments. But at the end of that phase, again, with input along the way, what we want to do is make sure that we're all clear and have your direction in terms of the choices that we should be pursuing, and hopefully the preferred direction. Then the process gets more technical in a sense. Procedurally, we will be preparing the draft amendments to the plan and issuing them, the draft supplemental EIS, and the draft code amendments for, again, a round of commentary. The commentary and the recommendations of the Planning Commission will be brought to you so that when a preferred direction is finalized and moved ahead, we all understand where that's going to be headed, and we can accomplish the last stage, which is finalizing everything, bringing the amendments so the code can be modified, confirming with a final EIS, and publishing that final plan by the end of the year. So that's the four stage of the process, with milestones that you're going to be very much involved with along the way. The community and stakeholder engagement is fundamental. We, as many of you have experienced in the comprehensive planning process, are really committed to reaching out, to bringing people in, and listening carefully. And that input will be then organized and provided so that you understand the kinds of citizen stakeholder points of view before you move ahead. The City Council has a fundamental role here in updating the planned amendments, making sure that those amendments are eventually reviewed and approved as appropriate. We're going to have a set of briefings, opportunities to work and talk together about things. The recommendations coming from the Planning Commission are going to be timed so that there's plenty of opportunity to talk and listen from that perspective. And all of this aimed to make sure that procedurally everything is ready for the timing of the adoption, final consideration of adoption. The department staff in front of you are going to be very much involved in coordinating, scheduling, communication, and working with our team. The team members are here, and Framework will be leading this, but we've got wonderful code experts, economic experts, environmental experts, and transportation experts to work with us in framing these amendments. So with that, we've covered a lot of ground in just a few minutes, but we're looking forward to any questions you may have and providing answers.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything to add, Kelly or David?
After questions, we do have a recommended motion, but I am going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a conversation.
Great, thank you. All right, Council, I will open it up for you all. Excuse me. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So I had a question regarding we have a 10% affordable housing requirement, and we're talking a lot about incentivizing. Maybe you could just help me understand why we wouldn't, say, increase the requirement to 15%, then we wouldn't have to incentivize so much. So I guess I'm just not clear why the conversation is just pointed toward incentivizing.
Very good question. While we're talking about incentives, that's the program that is set up today. We have a mandatory of a 10% requirement. We also have a voluntary option for developers to build to their maximum density. If we were looking at doing just the mandatory, we may need to consider looking at upzoning, changing that by right to get that affordable housing. It would just be something that we would need to explore as we're doing that existing conditions, that code audit, to see what our options are. I'm just speaking off the cuff right now, but that's something we could add to the list of things to further look at as part of this work. David?
I would agree with what Kelly said, and I would add to that it's also the level of affordability, right? So currently we have an 80% AMI, 10% inclusionary zoning requirement, and we're looking at pushing that down to 50%, below 50% if possible, looking at a blend of unit types for that diversity and array of affordability. And with that, there needs to be an incentive that goes along with that. As Steve said during his presentation, the challenge is right sizing it. It's finding the right spot where it's not so favorable to developers that they just run with it and you don't really get what you're asking for, but it's not so favorable to the affordability side that nothing gets built. And if you were to ratchet down on that inclusionary requirement to 15%, I don't know for certain. We'd have to do the economics around it or study the economics around it, but it's possible that nothing would get built. So there needs to be the give and take, and part of that is looking at what we have in terms of incentives. What is the carrot? Well, we have the ability to look at bundling with that additional market units. So in a say a 5-to-1 scenario, 5 market units for one affordable unit. So say you're in the 30% range or the 40% or wherever you might land, and it's 1 to 5 or 5 to 1, and out of 2,000 units, that roughly plays out to, I think what we said, 16 or something, and then 384. So you'd get 384 affordable units, and 16 market units would be how that additional 2,000 would play out under a 5-to-1 split. We don't know that that is the right spot to be in. We need to study that. But that is an example of how that could play out in a very rudimentary way. That's a simplified version of what something you might see.
I just add that if you have just a simple, this is the line, meet this line, you can structure incentives that will produce more good things, more affordable housing, different types of affordability, if you're thoughtful about how to do it, which is why many communities come up with a mix and give folks choices in how they want to be able to best provide the affordable housing. So it's expanding the range of choices for folks who are developing things, expanding the range of choices from an affordability, and most likely, if it works, and that's what our job is to do, is to figure it out, increase the rate of production of the kind of affordability that you're seeking.
So all of this is something you can explore and you'll just bring back to us and kind of really like showing us with this scenario, this is what we think would likely happen if we provide these incentives and if we keep it at 10% inclusionary zoning, those kind of scenarios, because that would be really helpful for me.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
And adding to that, it would be helpful to have multiple scenarios, kind of a slider, so that we could see if you do this, you can expect this. If you add this component, you can expect that. Because what I think at the end of the day we're looking at is enough good data that allows us to make good decisions going forward. My question has to do around, I have a concern about our ability to provide different types of housing as 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50, beyond, and thinking that we probably have to do more. There's multiple aspects that we may have to take into consideration. For example, if we own land, which we do, in particular areas where we, for example, if we did something that was more purpose-built, we took the old library, which is now a Boys and Girls Club, eliminated that, created a Boys and Girls Club that was purpose-built, and put housing above. Now you're looking, we've sucked the cost of the land out of the development. That allows us to bring in a development partner like an Arch to help manage, going forward. But I'm thinking that we're going to need supplemental plans going forward to help with this, because I don't know that we're going to achieve our objective with this alone. What are your thoughts?
This is a really good question that we've talked about a lot, and you're on a very important track here, which is dedicated developers, nonprofit developers of affordable housing know how to do it, have access to financing that's different from a typical market developer. So rather than piggybacking, if you can create the incentives to bring those the kinds of entities and encourage them to be here. It works, and that can be using community-owned land, but it can also, we've called it bring a friend to the party zoning, where if you have a private developer who can partner with a nonprofit developer, you can significantly change the ability to provide some of the lowest bracket housing. So those are exactly the directions that we want to dig into soon.
Okay, because this is outside of the town center, right? So I'm trying to figure out, like, if we were to explore other options, how does that play in your scope of work?
And I wanted to add that, to be clear, that we would not be studying anything outside of the town center.
That's what I thought. So, which is appropriate, because you have to put barriers in place, otherwise it goes crazy. So I'm just trying to I wouldn't, can I answer the question now, like, would we be better served with doing a different way altogether versus adding capacity into town center?
I think the answer is both. So the town center is not going to solve all of our affordability issues. It will address a portion of it. We also have the work under the comprehensive plan, which is identifying parcels outside of the town center where we could also look at partnerships, like the example that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So this is working in alignment with the work under the comprehensive plan, the housing element, House Bill 1110. So that's also happening at the same time. But just to be clear, Town Center will not take all of our affordable housing allocation. It will take a portion of it. And what we need to study is what's that right portion? What does that look like? And bring those options back to City Council for that policy direction as we move through this process.
Which kind of brings me to the next point, which is that comprehensiveness. So just so that, I'm trusting you guys to have that eagle-eye view over all of that aspect so that we're able to transact at the right times on the right projects. Because I have a concern of things being disjointed.
And I think that is a case for why this is a benefit to do this work now, so that we are in alignment with our comprehensive plan. So as we're talking about the town center amendments, we're doing that environmental review, we're also at the same time talking about the comprehensive plan, the housing element, and that is working together in alignment so we don't have conflicts, we don't miss something. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that go with that. So that point is really important, and I think that's a really great comment.
Thank you.
I wanted to add one thing to that. I agree with what Kelly said, but I also want to drive home the importance of maintaining the scope that we start out with. That if we expand the scope or deviate in the scope in the middle of the process, we are likely then going to have to decouple this, if we do pursue this, from the comprehensive plan. We must land the comprehensive plan in the end of 24. This work is optional. We're not dependent on this work for compliance through the comprehensive plan. I want to be clear about that. We do have a strategy already that does not necessitate this happening. And we are confident we will achieve certification from PSRC with our comprehensive plan if this doesn't happen. So we do have a backup strategy. If we go down this path and we end up, for some reason, the community is very interested and engaged and they want to participate, and this takes longer than we thought, we do have the ability to decouple and to continue on with this work into 25, say. We don't want to, right, but we do have that option.
And if you were to just give me a couple of other benefits that we get out of this process beyond the affordable housing, what else would you prioritize as the benefits that we get?
I would say from the slides that it's, have to remind me of the House bill number, but it was the one regarding, we have several obligations regarding streamlining permit process, regarding predictable and objective design standards. We have diversity in housing types. We have, so these are all things that we need to look at with the code and the town center plan anyway. So taking it on in partnership with this project is a value add. I would also say that we are, based on what the code says, when you're 1/3 through, we as a city should be revisiting the plan anyway. So we're doing it now. We would probably be picking it up in 25 anyway. So that work would be happening at that point anyway. It's really that alignment, I think, that, one thing that we notice a lot of is that, and we hear commentary on, is that we're a bit disjointed in our planning. Sometimes we're ahead with one aspect of planning and behind with another, and we're trying to sync it all up. It's a challenge, but we're trying.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Remember, David, carrots, sticks, and partnerships. So I agree with I'm just going to, every time we talk about this. So I agree with Deputy Mayor Lamb that I think we need to look really hard at what the stick is, which is what are those minimum thresholds? And they might vary, right? If it's, deeply affordable, if it's 0 to 30, it might be fewer units, right? Versus, if they're 30 to 50 or 50 to 80, they might be more units or whatever. But I think we have to look at, is our stick big enough? And then also the carrots part. And I think you guys have talked a lot about the incentives, and that's great. But I do think it has to be both. And I think the partnerships is what you're going to explore. They may or may not be the partnerships that happen, but to see, is there a likelihood that a partnership could exist to make that happen? So I agree with that, but I definitely want to see us look at raising that minimum bar of, is 10% too low? If we can make it higher, I think we just have to. So I definitely want to see that. I also think that as we talk about alignment, I know you mentioned these as more secondary goals, but I think they really have to be part of the primary scope, which is the sustainability and the transportation pieces. I think that's the other benefit of doing that now as we're doing the comprehensive plan work. If we wait and do this in 2025, I feel like it's going to be more expensive and more work because we're going to do things that we then have to go back and update the comp plan for. So I know it's a lot. I know it's only a year, but I really feel like it can't just be about the housing. We have to include those other elements in there because I kind of feel like, our requirements around sustainability need to be there. And sustainability and sustainable elements in housing affects affordability. We always only look at the entry costs of affordable housing, but affordable housing is that ongoing monthly payment that you have to make. It's not just rent. If you don't have utility bills that are $300 a month, that makes your housing a lot less expensive by, I think, like $300 a month. But I do think those are important elements as well. Same thing with transportation, right? If you don't have to own a car, that lowers your costs, your monthly costs. So I hope that those are things that can be looked at as we do this to get that alignment, and that's why it's worth doing it now.
So that said, that the primary focus would remain diverse and affordable housing. There would be other secondary objectives that would be included in there. The degree to which we can identify and latch on to already vetted, already established sustainability standards or energy efficiency standards that maybe K4C has worked through, or some of our other partner cities have worked through, and we can simply, instead of recreating the wheel of new cloth, if we can take advantage of that is a real efficiency for us, where we might not be successful as if we're attempting to create a whole new set of standards, from new cloth, and that takes quite a bit of time. So we're really trying to be efficient with this, and so I'm just laying that out, that the degree to which we could get support in identifying things that you think work, that we could look at and try to replicate, would be extremely helpful.
Excellent, because I do think there's a lot of potential for grant money for those sustainability efficiencies in the housing, that we could get money to help offset those costs. So while some people argue we can't do it sustainably because it costs more, there's a lot of money available right now to tackle that. The other thing I just have to ask, why is it an 11% contingency instead of 10? It's not material, but it's just been bothering me.
So when we first put that in the agenda bill, Kelly and I looked at each other and said, somebody's going to ask about this.
You didn't bet it was going to be me?
So, well, I mean, it would probably, we were even asking, right? It was So the issue there is that the contingency is built in staff hours, in hours, and that translates to a mixed bag of hourly rates across the fee schedule.
Okay.
And that's then bundled with a 2%, so that's a 9%, and then that's bundled with a 2% of overall project cost contingency, which comes out to be 11%.
It's fine. I just,
Yeah.
I had to ask.
Yeah, I would just
I didn't get the email. I asked.
One of the things that we did, we thought a lot about it. The environmental impact process is something that we, as the planning team, don't really control entirely. And if the scope of the environmental process needs to address circumstances that one of the reviewing agencies brings forward or community members bring forward, we want to be able to provide for that. But without getting complicated about it. But if it's not needed, we don't need to spend it. We won't.
Totally, yeah. And then my last question is just that it said in the agenda bill that this would be paid for out of the salary savings from 2023, but we just heard we're not allowed to touch those. So how is this going to be paid for, Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. I think we are covering that from the underspend. It's not necessarily salary savings, but that this is part of the commitment to come to you all and say, if we have dollars available and we have work that needs to be done, that we come to you all and get the authority to use those available dollars on another project. So that's what this equates to.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Napure.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple questions. I think Stephen mentioned development standards at the beginning, and having worked on, the SMCs and the development standards and all those phases, I think I agree with both of you saying we really need to be consistent. So my question there was, will we end up being consistent with the main municipal code and town center, or at least have, use the same terminology, same sort of, approach to development standards?
Absolutely. But to a certain point, the town center development standards are really based on urban design, where outside of the town center, that is more residential. So there are some nuances, but where there is consistency, we want to make sure they're in alignment to avoid confusion or appeal in interpretation.
Great, thank you. And then, just so that I understand this correctly, this study will be for 4,000 units and 600,000 square feet of commercial space. Does that mean that after the EIS is done, that's what we're going to make it achieve? Like that's going to happen?
Those are the maximum caps that we can study within this time frame, because at a certain point with the draft EIS, they were reviewed. So we're looking at those efficiencies. If that's to end up to be the new caps that are adopted as part of the plan and the code, that's to be determined. And I think it was stage 2, Steve, if you can correct me, where we come back and we say, hey, what are your priorities? We give you options to consider. That could be affordable housing bonus pool. It could be less than 4,000. It could be 4,000. You'll be giving us that direction before we start that work on the supplemental EIS. Yeah.
Exactly. You sort of think of those numbers as the box that future development comes in. It may not fill it all the way up. You don't want the box too small. If it's a little larger, that's okay. But what we don't want to do is to say, for example, looking at the range of requirements plus incentives, if it looks like I'm making up a number, 3,200 units seem to be achievable in what's foreseeable, then it's got to be right sized. Back to David's point, it's got to be something. They've got to be approaches that, in our best judgment, look productive.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're not stuck with these numbers and that we make the EIS study fit these numbers, right? Like that's not our goal. That's not how this works.
So environmental impact statement is a disclosure document. And what it does is it identifies potential significant adverse environmental impacts that could be mitigated or that could not be. A decision maker could still proceed with the project knowing that there is an unmitigated impact. That's just the way EISs work. You're balancing the pros and cons of a decision, and it's supposed to help inform your decision making. So we would be studying up to 4,000. That doesn't mean you need to choose to take the full 4,000. You could choose 3,000 if it's the right fit for what you're trying to achieve. What you couldn't do is go beyond 4,000.
Great. And I think there was a public comment or email sent in specifically to the commercial square footage that was studied a long time back, and some of the feedback, I know it was a long time back, so I don't know if you guys were able to recollect that study that was done and maybe talk about it a little bit more.
Sure. That was economic study that was done in 2006. It was an economic profile of the city at the time with a considerable less population, a different set of developers and landowners, different community priorities. Yes, it was done, and it helped inform the preferred alternative that was studied for the town center. Since that time, we have also done an economic development profile and strategy in 2017, and we're currently doing that work again as part of the comprehensive plan, as part of the economic development element. The conditions have changed. We are hearing from our community engagement, from our development community, that more commercial space is needed. Our population has increased considerably. I think folks want more services. They don't want to drive off the plateau. I think it's been presented to you all as well that we lose a lot of our sales tax to Issaquah and Redmond, and we want to keep that here. So that was a great study at the time. It helped inform the preferred alternative, but it's 2023, and we have a new set of existing conditions that we need to address, and that's what we'll be doing as part of this work.
One additional thing that we've talked a lot about, we've talked about with you all, we've talked about it with the Planning Commission, is we have many homegrown businesses, local businesses here in the city that, our code compliance team would tell us are outgrowing their homes and probably should locate to a viable commercial space. And the whole notion and idea around affordable commercial space is one that I'm really interested in. I've not really heard much about that in the community planning realm. And we're going to be working with Steve to explore that and try to understand, is there a way for us to incentivize or require some level of affordability in commercial space as well? Right size units, business incubators, those types of things, because I think our community is asking for that.
Yeah, and I think another sort of fine point on that is, I know Councilmember Howe, I think in one of your replies, you mentioned nobody wants to see closed, storefronts, right? And I don't think that's something we want here as well. But I think there's maybe a different notion of what a commercial space means. Like you said, it's not just storefronts or coffee shops. It's also co-working spaces. It could be another community space where, people could congregate and do something creative, like it could be studios. So it's not just, retail per se as we know it. So I just want us to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, I just say that one of the things that we've worked a lot on is what's called flex space. It's not an office. There are offices there. They're fabricating maybe some high technology equipment, and they may sell it through that same place, but it doesn't fit neatly within the old-fashioned zoning categories. So that idea of how quickly business is adapting, we need to make sure that we give them the room to adapt.
I just wanted to add one more point, and it's actually another benefit of why we should be doing this work now in alignment with the comprehensive plan is because we have done all this community outreach to develop the city's first economic development element. And, you know, we love policy work, we love setting goals, but we also like seeing things implemented. And this is one way to do that by looking at our development regulations and encouraging that type of development based on some of the feedback we have received to date as part of the comprehensive plan. So we'll just add that to the benefit bucket.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add to that, really, Kelly. I'm really excited about the economic development that we're going to get to do with this update. And I've just, in a cursory walking around Gilman Village in Issaquah, and they're in the middle of their Buy Issaquah shopping campaign, and which I just thought was it was how great for them. But I would really like to see something like that down the road here too, that we would get behind such a campaign and really, and I know per our declaration at the beginning of our meeting when this is Small Business Month, I would like to really, you know, all year round get behind such a campaign like that and really encourage our residents to shop in Sammamish and encourage our sales tax revenues. And I think our community is really ready for that. So I'm very excited about this work. So thank you so much.
All right, Council, I'll go ahead and make a motion unless anyone else would like to speak. Councilmember Treen.
First, just question, I think it's for Stephen. When you mentioned at the beginning, regional TDR, is that what you, did I hear you say regional?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not, I'll just be straight. I'm not interested in regional TDR. If our TDR program needs to be within the city limits. Okay. The second one, they kind of came fast, so I was writing as quick as I could, but the ADUs already exist, so I was kind of confused if that was is that a part of the town center, or are ADUs part of the town center?
They are. You can build ADUs in the town center. Senate Bill 1337 is a mandate requirement from the state. We need to fix some of our development regulations to be in compliance with that bill. So that's what we're referring to, just to make sure we're updating our regulations appropriately as mandated from the state.
That's new information. Thank you. And then you put up the stages, Stephen, you had the stages up there. After stage one, can the council, the legislative body stop the SEIS?
We will be coming to council and saying, these are the alternatives that appear to be appropriate to study, whether there's maybe a preferred approach. But we would be asking for confirmation that the things that would be studied in the impact study are the correct things. Yes, and if they're not correct, then, but you would have to do, in order to get the plan update and then the code changes from a regulatory standpoint, the SEPA process is required so that the impacts are understood, and the mitigation's clear.
Correct.
So yes, he'll be coming back to you for direction and approval at that point.
All right. So my other question you already answered, so thank you on that one. The cost seems really high. 437,000 minus a little bit seems really high for. Is that because of the rush, the fact that we're trying to do this in a year, and so they're amping up staffing to get it done? Is that why the cost? I don't get it.
So one of the things to understand, environmental impact statements, regardless if it's a new EIS or you're supplementing, it follows almost the same process, and they are They are pricey, they are expensive. Additionally, we would, so part of that scope is also to fund the updates to the code and to the plan. We have a large consultant team because we have some areas of interest that need to be further studied under that EIS. And all of that combined together and completing that in a year is the result of that fee that's being proposed.
Okay, so my concern is that when we started this process, it seems like 2 years ago, to do the comprehensive plan update, that it was to just be an update, and this is starting to feel more like a rewrite. So I just caution the council and staff. I mean, if we're moving to something that's a rewrite, then I have a challenge with that. So if I heard correctly now for David Pyle, question for David Pyle, the supplementary EIS, is it necessary to be completed?
It would only be needed if you were to amend the town center plan and code. It's not necessary. We are on track with our comprehensive plan independently of any proposal to amend the town center plan and code. And we anticipate that would require use of what we call an expanded SEPA checklist, which basically is a discipline, a series of papers that does a review of each of the elements of the environment. And that then helps us understand where there might be impacts. It's kind of like a EIS light. It's right between a standard DNS and an EIS light. It's probably jargon for you, but it's sort of a middle ground.
So is that the same process or similar to what we did with the Bluma EIS?
The Bluma EIS was a full EIS.
Was a full EIS.
Yeah. So the comp plan is currently on a path to utilize a standard DNS process utilizing what we call an expanded checklist. If we were to do an amendment to the town center plan, because there was an EIS done, an FEIS issued for the town center plan, we would utilize under SEPA what's called a supplemental environmental impact statement process, where we would do a gap analysis looking at what the past analysis studied, what's changed, what we're looking at, and then we would identify any potential impacts that would go along with that.
And since we did the Bluma EIS, that was the scope of that work was traffic, level of service on traffic. It seems to me that we would want to use that. I mean, because one of the reasons, we would just move to housing next anyway. I mean, that was the idea. So that's kind of where we're headed. This is on housing, specifically in the town center, but it's still about housing. So it seems to me that we would want to actually use that Bluma EIS for the traffic to refer to or to inform this EIS. Is that? I mean, am I just?
No,
I'm just throwing a
absolutely
dart
right.
out here, but this is my thoughts, right?
So under SEPA law, we would adopt, incorporate by reference, and we would utilize that work. So that work is valid; it stands. The action was chosen not to be pursued, but the EIS and the analysis that goes along with it, the environmental impact that goes along with that type of transportation infrastructure still stands. So we would draw from that as part of this, and there is a certain level of efficiency because that work was already completed. So we try to capture as much as we can from that and roll it into this because we don't need to duplicate that effort.
Right. I just to emphasize that the thinking here is that it's a supplemental EIS. It's very rigorous. It's extremely important to validate and accompany code changes and the plan amendments. However, it's important that we keep that focused and really take advantage of what's out there. And that's how we've thought through it. And we think we can do that, which is why we hope it won't get outside of those boundaries and require using a contingency. But it can happen depending upon what the agency requests are.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly, David, and Steve. I think this is super helpful. I'm definitely interested in seeing what this is, kind of what the possibilities are. Again, I think approving this does not mean 4,000 units are being built tomorrow. We can all agree on that. I think this is, it sounds like a great timeline. I think it'll be, like you said, if push comes to shove, taking this away from like the comprehensive plan update also sounds good. I appreciate the work, and it looks like at least we're all moving sort of forward together, whatever the end result is. I move, this is a long one. I move that the council direct the city manager to initiate work necessary to amend the town center sub-area plan and associated development regulations and amend contract C 2022-044 through supplemental agreement with framework consistent with the scope of work outlined in Exhibit 1, increasing the total contract amount by $436,749 to an updated of $1,424,993.40.
Second.
All right. Councilmember Trine, would you like to speak to that motion?
Actually, I'd like to make an amendment.
Go ahead.
I'd like to amend to adopt by reference the Bluma EIS.
All right. I am not hearing a second on that. So I can move back to Councilmember Stewart. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for this work. And I know you said like we have a backup plan to be able to check the boxes to get our comp plan approved at the end of 2024. But from our discussion previously, like that's literally all it would do is it would pass the legal test, but it wouldn't actually help us accomplish our actual goals. So I really appreciate this, and I hope you'll keep coming back to us to keep this on track so we can actually get this done as part of our comp plan update, because I think it's really important that we have a plan that actually helps us achieve the affordable housing, sustainability goals, et cetera. I don't want to approve a plan that just checks a box. I want to approve a plan that's going to really achieve the goals. So thanks.
Councilmember Howe, would you like to speak to the motion?
I wanted to speak to Councilmember Trine's amendment and just ask the question for clarity on why we would need to add that when it seems like it's a natural outcome that the... I think that was an instead of. Oh, what? Instead of? Did I understand that incorrectly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe it was an instead of this EIS.
No.
Is that not true? Sorry. Please go ahead.
Not when it's to reference the Bluma EIS.
It's already part of it.
It's not, but that's okay. You didn't second it, and so we're out of line at this point. So
Okay. Is that clarification? Are you guys good? Okay. All right, council, motion on the floor is to approve this motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
nay.
All right,
And
so
I would have liked to speak to
by
why, but
by 6-1, that does pass. Thank you.
And while I have the mic,
Yes.
Councilmember Indepray, thank you. And really appreciated working with you as a planning commissioner and as a council member, and look forward to any phone calls you might have. Helping us out as we navigate this future here. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Councilmember Trine, I know obviously we've already voted on it. Did you want to speak to that? Okay. Let's take a break for, let's be back at 7, is 7:45 too long? 7:40? 7:40. We'll be back in 8 minutes. All right, welcome back. Thank you, everybody. We are on to item number 14, review of the draft 2024 PROS, I was going to say PROS, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan with Anjali.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. We are excited to bring you a full draft of the 2024 PROS Plan update this evening. I'm joined on the staff side by Kevin Teague, Deputy Director of our department, Shelby Perrault, Parks Project Manager, both online, and Janie Walzer, Management Analyst of our department, in person. The city's consultant, Steve Dew, Principal at Conservation Technique, is also here tonight for the presentation. We were last in front of Council in September when we shared the results of the public engagement process and site assessments of our parks. Since then, the team has worked hard and put together a draft of the full plan and shared it with both the Parks and Recreation Commission as well as the Planning Commission, and they are supportive of how this document is taking shape. We realize the document itself is quite long, and we'd like for you to keep in mind that this is an update, so the changes are not significant. You've already reviewed the goals, and tonight we'll walk you through some of the major capital improvement projects that we hope to accomplish in the next 6 years. And lastly, the PROS plan is a component of the comprehensive plan, and staff are communicating internally to ensure that both documents are coordinated. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. Again, for the record, named Steve Dew, Conservation Techniques. And we do have a brief-ish presentation, much like the last, that hits on some of the highlights. Primary intent for this evening is to give you a real quick overview and focus on the capital improvement plan element of the plan, but provide substantial amount of time for Council feedback, comments, and questions. Again, the presentation will follow this outline where I will review what we've heard from the community so far, how that translated into key project recommendations, highlight some of the next steps, which really do wrap up the project, and leave time for Council. As a reminder, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, or PROS plan for short, is the city's 6-year plan, strategic plan and guide for all things parks and recreation. It's this department's functional plan that gives them guidance on improvements and projects to implement over the next 6 years. It's also a policy and strategy document that links to the comprehensive plan, in that it includes goals and policy statements that will carry into the comprehensive plan. Also, it provides a capital planning tool. The plan includes a list of capital projects that are recommendations that will be guides for future discussions with Council through budgeting process to implement projects in the future. Lastly, it's a communications tool to say where Sammamish is today, what we've heard from the community, and what those key priorities and directions from the community are, and how they could be implemented going forward. The community engagement process was robust and thorough to develop this draft plan. As you see on the screen, we touched the community in a lot of different ways, primarily through a community survey that was conducted in 4 languages. We also did multiple tabling events during the summer and spring to keep the project alive and get feedback throughout the course of the year. We had 2 public meetings, one in the spring, one in September, 3 different group-based stakeholder discussions, as well as keeping the project in the public eye through the community or the city's website, social media posts, flyers, etc. And the Park and Recreation Commission's been provided updates throughout the course of the process over the last 10 months. In all, 900 participants provided feedback into this draft plan. In September, when we had a session with Council, we did review what we heard from the community through the survey. And I just want to do a quick recap on some of those core themes that we heard. One is to basically take care of what you have, to renovate and upgrade existing parks to make sure they're functional, safe, and in good condition. pay attention to ADA compliance and remove barriers to access so everyone has opportunity to play and enjoy. Those can take the form of ramps into playgrounds, safety surfacing under playgrounds, access to benches, tables, and picnic areas along park routes. Also, preserving and maintaining natural areas. There's a strong awareness and support for the preserves that the city has, and to maintain and keep those natural areas natural for the future is a strong commitment that we've heard from the community. Continuing to build the system out, the city has purchased a number of acres over the last 6 years. So there's strong interest in seeing some of those newer properties developed, and a lot of interest from those master plan processes that really sparked a lot of excitement. I'm thinking of Beaton Hill, I'm thinking of Big Rock South, those sorts of projects. So there's momentum and interest in seeing those projects developed, at least in phases. Also, we heard a lot about trails, trail connectivity. So interest in expanding the existing trail network to tie parks together, park to park, or parks to other community destinations. Also, some interest in additional user conveniences, things like restrooms, additional parking, clear signage. And then last, expanding recreational opportunities as the city builds out additional park spaces, providing for a wider array of different recreation opportunities to include things like another off-leash area or pickleball or some other activities that aren't currently provided but also were noted in those other master plans I referenced earlier. The PROS plan before you tonight also includes a series of system analyses that look at different ways to think about the overall park system. That includes mapping that addresses access and distribution of parks, who has easy access and where are gaps. Also looking at physical accessibility, again relating to ADA, as well as the diversity of spaces, making sure that different park areas and open spaces can provide for different types of recreation amenities. The map on screen is just one example of a map that's in the PROS plan that is a tool that we use to look at gaps. So for this particular map, the kind of pinkish brownish color represents a half-mile travel shed from existing parks. And the concept here is we put pins on the map for all legitimate entry points. It's not the perimeter of the park property, it's just the entry points. And then basically tell the mapping software to travel a quarter mile, half mile, mile, etc., to create these catchment areas or travel sheds for each park. This map also shows the travel sheds for the homeowner association private parks that exist across the city, and those are in kind of that purple hue. So everything in white represents those areas of the city that are outside a half-mile travel distance to an existing park entry point. So again, it's just a tool we use to think about who has access, what gaps might exist, and it's a tool for staff going forward to think about how to apply this to future potential acquisitions. The plan also includes a look at levels of service through a number of different filters, one being public satisfaction, basically from the community survey, another through site assessment, rating or scale based on our on-the-ground review from our landscape architect to look at the condition, quality, and care that exists in the existing facilities, as well as the distribution in the walk sheds that I just walked through. So in compiling that, we put together a simple kind of color-coded matrix to give sense to where the city's strong and where some attention might be needing to be paid going forward. Overall, the city's in a great position, a lot of public support. The condition of the facilities are great, and you've got really good access to the different types of parks. The one area is, again, with that half-mile travel shed, but that can be filled going forward through potential future acquisitions. And comparing the 2018 plan to the 2024 plan, the big themes from the 2018 plan were to pursue acquisitions to fill those gaps that were noted in that plan, as well as increase capacity for field sports and improve wayfinding communications. For this current plan, the 2024 plan, some of that still carries forward, but the real thrust is, again, on maintaining what you have, expanding recreation opportunities, and building out those properties that you did purchase over the last 6 years. So in terms of the overall plan structure, it's structured similarly to that from the 2018 plan. And basically the first 4 chapters are kind of the front end: context, process, inventory, background information, community profile, the process for community engagement, and then classifications and inventory. The middle section of the plan is the needs assessment chapters. Those are thematic by topic, so parks and open space, trails, recreation, and operations. Each one of those chapters includes information about what the community said, regional and statewide and national trend information, as well as ideas about potential improvements. And then toward the back end of the plan, goals and action statements, and the project list and implementation strategies that would be considered for the next 6 years. So that's just a real quick walkthrough of how the plan's structured. In terms of key recommendations, I will start by just saying that the draft project list, that is the capital improvement plan, in this document is intended to be a planning tool for the next 6 years. Again, it's the capital improvement plan is not an official budget, but it does help staff have conversations with the Park and Rec Commission as well as this body to think through key priorities and apply projects to future budgets to make sure the projects are funded and move forward in a reasonable manner. The capital improvement plan in this document also includes costing of projects out over the 6 years, as well as proposed time frames for those projects, and it carries forward unfinished projects from the 2018 plan as well. And at this point, I'll ask Shelby Peralt to help walk through the specifics of the capital plan.
Thank you, Steve, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. The Parks Capital Improvement Plan is divided into 3 categories. First is CIP projects. These are design or construction projects, such as Big Rock Park Central, which opened in 2021. Second is planning projects, such as master planning, like the recently adopted Beaton Hill Park and Big Rock Park South master plans. And third is other. These may be land acquisition or less specific park development projects, such as trail connections. And then something to note is that overall park system planning project, like our PROS plan effort, is captured in our operating budget, not in our park CIP. There are several revenue sources that fund capital projects in the park CIP. They have been separated into primary and secondary buckets. So starting with primary, these 3 revenue sources that you see provide the majority of funding for our CIP, with REIT dollars being the largest contribution. And then secondary sources are traditionally smaller amounts and not always consistent revenue sources. Current outlier in this is investment interest, which is traditionally a smaller amount, but is currently much higher due to our beginning fund balance and higher interest rates at the moment. And then you can hit next, Janie. Thank you. Before walking through a selection of projects, I just want to take a look at the bigger picture of our CIP. This pie chart that you see here, which is also in the draft plan, summarizes the overall capital expenditures in the CIP by project category over the next 6 years. As you can see, there's approximately $43 million allocated to CIP projects, which is spread across renovations, park development, acquisition, planning, and trails. I'd like to touch on the allocated funding for land acquisition. A total of $13 million was allocated to land acquisition back in 2017 when the land acquisition strategy was adopted. The amount you see here is the remainder of that original allocation and will continue to be carried forward until the remaining funds have been expended. The line item for land acquisition in the park CIP, which is in Exhibit 2 of your packet, shows a $0 allocation. And that's because this funding is being carried forward from 2023, and additional funding has not been allocated for 24 to 29. The Parks and Planning Commission had noted this $0 allocation and brought up some questions about it. So I wanted to be sure to note during this presentation that the remaining funding for land acquisition will indeed be carried forward into 2024 and beyond. Like Steve mentioned, Chapter 10 of the PROS plan identifies key project recommendations that are a result of the core themes we heard during the community engagement process. These 5 key recommendations act as a guide for identifying specific projects in the park CIP. And I'll highlight some of the projects that fulfill these recommendations on the next few slides. So starting off with project highlights with Inglewood Middle School, I know that you are pretty familiar with this project right now. So just a brief update. Both the synthetic turf contract and construction contract were awarded last month, and construction is anticipated to be completed in summer of 2024. Next is East Sammamish Park. This work will focus on 2 baseball fields and will convert the existing sand infields to synthetic turf, install new fencing and backstops, and some various site improvements to support the rehabilitation work at the fields. Where we are in the process, we have selected a consultant and are currently reviewing their scope of services with the intent to bring a design contract to City Council in January. Construction timeline for this project, thanks, Janie. The timeline for this project will be coordinated with the field improvements at Inglewood and will be completed after the Little League season ends. And then next is Big Rock Park South, which I'm very excited to share. We will be beginning work on Phase 1 improvements at Big Rock South in 2025. Now, you may have noticed that this phasing designation doesn't exactly match what we had in the master plan. And the reason for that is that we have combined the central park improvements and meeting and event area phases into one. Work will include the infrastructure necessary to open the park to the public, in addition to renovations to the structures, trail improvements, and potentially portions of work from other phases if budget allows. A little over $17 million has been allocated to this project, and we anticipate park opening in 2028. And then one thing to note is that in the interim, there will be a soft opening for trail use early in 2024. And then moving on to Klahani, Phase 1 improvements will begin in 2028 and will include renovating the multi-purpose fields, expanding and reconfiguring the parking lot and stormwater infrastructure, picnic areas, and an accessible loop trail around the fields. Approximately $5.5 million has been allocated for design and a portion of construction, with the remaining funds needing to be allocated in 2030 in order to complete construction of this phase. And then next is Beaton Hill Park, South Park improvements, which is scheduled to begin in 2029. Now this phase does align with what was presented in the master plan and is summarized on the screen. Just over $700,000 has been allocated for the schematic design of this phase. Additional funding will need to be allocated for final design and construction to be completed in 2030 and 2031. And since the full park opening Thanks. Will not be during this 6-year cycle. We do have funds allocated for a soft opening of the park, with funds allocated in 2025 to begin trail development to open up a portion of the park. And then moving on to Trail Connections. This funding is for future trail projects throughout the entire city. Now, an example of this work that's currently underway is trail work on a city-owned parcel at the north limits that would provide a trail connection between Evans Creek Preserve and the Power Line Trail. And we are showing $500,000 allocated to this work biannually. So after quickly walking through those project highlights, I wanted to circle back to the 5 key project recommendations that I showed you earlier. So starting off with Trail Connections, looking at which projects fulfill these recommendations. For trails, it would be fulfilled through citywide trail projects, a soft opening of Beaton Hill Park for trail use, and a trail connection to Beaton Hill Park from Lower Commons. Next is park development and enhancements, which be fulfilled through development of Big Rock South and design of Beaton Hill Park, and then through enhancement of Klahani Park and athletic field improvements at Inglewood and East Sammamish. And then the remaining 3, we would have ADA and access enhancements, which would be achieved through our capital repair and replacement program, in addition to barrier removals within our parks. Acquisition to fill park system gaps. This would be realized through land acquisition, in addition to completing master plans at parcels that we previously acquired to ensure that those new parcels are bridging the gap in our park system with those missing programmatic elements. And then last is wayfinding and signage. This would be completed through our citywide wayfinding program, like the image you see on the right, as well as at specific parks during each of our individual capital improvement projects. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it back to Anjali for next steps.
Thank you, Shelby. So in addition to any questions you have for us tonight, we will request that you have any other comments that you can get them to us by next week, so by next Tuesday. And our plan is to take the final document incorporating all the comments we've received from the Parks Commission, the Planning Commission, and all of you tonight, and incorporate them and take a final document on December 6th to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and then to the Planning Commission on December 7th for a public hearing and recommendation for adoption to City Council. We'll be back in front of you for the first hearing on December 12th, and we anticipate final adoption of the PROS plan to occur in January after 2 public hearings with City Council. And the 2024 PROS plan update will be added to the 2024 comprehensive plan when it is adopted in Volume 2 as the Parks chapter. With that, I will turn it back to you, Mayor, for questions.
Great, thank you. Council, I will open it. Councilmember Napure.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a quick question. On the map that was shown with like the white areas that are not, that don't have the park coverage, I mean, there is that East Lake Sammamish Trail, right? So I was just a little curious on, I know that's not a park, but it's still part of our, I mean, I know it's King County, but it still feels like it provides value and it's a trail. It's for public use, it's for recreation. Why would that not be sort of included as part of that map? Because otherwise, like the Southwest just shows like a big blob of white. So I just was curious about that.
Yeah, great question. And to clarify, the map that we did show on screen this evening was strictly for certain types of parks. We do have maps in the document that reference trails, but we could also do a composite that shows everything smashed together to basically illustrate how the community has access to some form of recreation to meet that need.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful. And then my second question along with that was that area not, is that just not conducive to having parks? Do we not have, is there just so much development that there's no space to have parks? Or are there private parks that we don't know about in that area?
We do have a lesser number of parks along that stretch, but more recently we've acquired the Parker parcels. And they will start helping fill those gaps.
And I think we also have, or we also approved like that connection from
George Davis Creek.
Right,
that's
like
the
to
Yates
the East Lake Submersion. Good, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. The very first document that I got to review when I got on council was the previous version of the PROS plan, so brings back some memories. One of the things I love is, how you do a great job of identifying the goals and the objectives and how that relates. Definitely hoping, Mr. City Manager, we can make sure we kind of carry that level of detail forward into our retreat into January and make sure, again, to David's point, we keep all of our things working together. So that's great. The trails and connections, you have like trails are for connections and transportation, but I also think that the trails are part of they play a role in the climate resiliency as well, right? The more connections we have that are non-motorized, the better. So I kind of get credit for that there. And then I love that it very specifically calls out that there's nothing planned on 30 acres. I have to say that I heard that a lot from the folks down in Trossachs. Someone somewhere started some rumor that we're going to like come in and, pave over paradise down in 30 Acres Park. So I'm glad we have this document and we can point people to that. This is no, there are no plans. And then finally, I love how you manage a pipeline of projects. So you have a pipeline of projects in varying stages, and I think that gives us a lot of options, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of options for grants. So that's all I had. That's great. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So I was looking at the conceptual trails, and I know that we're doing work on the Lewis Thompson Tight Line, and that's going to give accessibility or easier accessibility to the East Lake Sammamish Trail, but that's just like one connection point. And as we kind of like what Councilmember Stewart's talking about, like there's so much that we want to do in terms of connectivity, and it does relate to our climate action plan, to get people out of cars and to connect to that trail, I think is really important. And so, there's the connection on 212, and we've talked about that. And then there's there's like 3 other ones. Like I would love to see some sort of priority for those trails, at least just one. And since I live in that area, you're showing trails in Rock Meadow. I don't believe those are public. I believe those are private. Am I correct? Because the way I'm reading the map, it looks like it's public and anybody can walk there. So I don't know how you distinguish that.
Thanks for that. Thanks for pointing that out. And we did have a conversation with staff about that. We chose to show it, but if it is problematic as private property, we can certainly change the designation or eliminate it completely.
I liked how you showed trends. I particularly liked the rope-based playground option. I really like that. There was one thing that I thought was a little perplexing was you're showing a graph on a chart on page 12 with the population change, and you're showing the year 2040 is having 66,000, and that contradicts a chart that I've been seeing in our housing diversification toolkit, which shows that our population at 2044 will be 74,000. And so you're showing very stable and very little growth. I mean, we're at 68. And so in 2040, you're showing 66, which is a decline in population. In your description, though, you're saying as the population expands. So there's a lot of contradiction there. I do think that the population, wherever we end up, is going to be really important as we look at this plan to get the population numbers correct. And ideally, they align with another plan that we have. I'm not sure where you're getting the data. The Housing Diversification Toolkit's using OFM numbers, and you're not showing the source. So I think that's a really critical part that needs to be updated. And also on page 15, you mentioned that 82% of households fall within the higher income bracket of 100,000 plus. And I had been reading up on something else, and the census data of 2022 shows that 40% of households make 95,000 or less. So again, that contradicts, and you're not showing the source of your information. So those were just two big areas that I think just need some further looking into. Other than that, I think it's a pretty good plan, and I appreciate that you showed the actual CIP, the priorities, because I was looking through and I'm like, where is it? So thank you for that.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I love the plan. I think it's great, and thank you for all your work. You had referenced a lot of community engagement and community feedback to parks, and I had just wondered, just being in the parks of other cities, for example, the Botanic Gardens in Bellevue, where in that original home that's there, they now have a coffee shop. And I wonder, has that ever been called up by residents where they wish they had even some sort of an ability to buy a coffee on the way to, walk through a trail, or some kind of a snack area, if it was just, of a temporary nature. But I feel sometimes we're kind of missing some of those kind of community gathering spots within what I keep referencing to myself as our downtown parks, that people would have an opportunity to do that. And I think of the Freed House maybe in Big Rock Park Central or something like that, where we would even have a truck. I just wonder, does that come from the community? Is that a kind of a desire or wish that you've heard?
We have had from time to time a request for some kind of a truck to come to our parks, and it does take a process so that we have some form of a selection process, and we are not just cherry picking someone to do that. We've also recently had someone actually reach out about the Reard House for a coffee shop, and that is currently being renovated by the Heritage Society. So that particular location, it will be a little more time even if we were to consider it. And then we'd have to talk about what is the best way to make it fair and some kind of an open process before we decide to do something like that.
Thank you, Anjali. I know with the coffee shop, for example, at the Botanic Gardens in Bellevue, it started out as a coffee cart just inside the house because they didn't have a proper kitchen, etc. So it started out that way and kind of developed further. And they went through the whole process with the City of Bellevue for the RFP and everything. But I just wondered about that kind of thing, that it might be something that the community would respond to, maybe at a park that was more accessible to passing traffic as opposed to a park that's tucked way off, and maybe you would not get the passing traffic and nor the business as a result, but it might be something to think about down the road.
Sure.
Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just a couple of questions. Has to do, I'll just pick a few here. The emerald necklace is referenced a couple of times. Excuse me, but it's just sort of an afterthought. like a beat, as a nice to have as a connecting trail type of a thing. And maybe that's where it belongs in priority, but that's also something that I'd like to elevate if I can. So that would be my feedback, is to figure out a way to, if it's going to be a regional asset, then let's turn it into that, and let's see if there's an opportunity to expand on what this could do. So I saw it potentially playing a larger role in your section on the regional connectivity component. So there's that. The other question I had to do with staffing. Some of your charts show that you are optimizing your staffing. I have a concern over that for long-term sustainability. And just if you could give me just a little bit more information about your staffing levels are low compared to other cities. Is that your intent? If so, is that sustainable?
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to that. So our department is slightly different from other cities in a couple of ways. Other cities do more direct programming. And so the numbers get a little skewed when we compare.
Not a one-to-one.
Exactly. And we're also a contract city, so even for our operations and maintenance, we do have full-time staff, but then we also rely on seasonals, and we rely on a contract for landscape maintenance. So that skews our numbers as well. But you do raise a good point. Some of the projects you've seen will necessitate, we've been discussing up to 2 additional full-time staff at the end of 6 years.
Okay, because I wanted to make sure we weren't getting stretched too thin for too long, I guess would be my concern. I did have another question. It had to do with the Metropolitan Parks District idea. There's others. There's a light district. I'm curious if you explored that at all. There's different ways of skinning the cat for economic opportunity. I mean, Councilmember O'Farrell brought up one, which is there a way to do like a coffee cart type of a thing? Because that is another recognized way to add revenue into coffers. I'm just curious if that was something you looked at, or if the Metropolitan Parks District, supersedes that, which I assume it kind of does.
Anjali's looking at me. So thank you for the question. And in the plan document, the notion or the idea of a Metropolitan Park District shows up in 2 primary places, one in the implementation strategy section, and then in more detail in the appendix. The intent for noting it is as simply a potential tool that the city could pursue.
Possibility.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily suggest the direction, but it does suggest that if the city wants to pursue that, there are probably some steps to take prior to just putting out a ballot, which is inquiring with the public and seeing what the level of support would be, et cetera. So it's noted as a point of future consideration.
Okay, my last question has to do with HOAs, but they're referenced heavily throughout the document. There isn't really a place where I saw where parks had any kind of role with HOA besides listing that they existed. And I'm trying to see or understand, where would they fall in terms of some kind of communication strategy, oversight, in order to incorporate them more directly into parks planning, for example, because they're private property. They won't allow you to many times to have an easement, but sometimes they will. So is that a Parks Department responsibility to work on those types of easements and to work with different property owners that have access there? If you could just help me understand that better.
I'll speak to that, and Steve, add to it if I don't cover it. But basically, the reason we do identify those HOA parks are they help fill the gaps for people for proximity to get to a place to play. But we don't have the resources to really go in and maintain them, and it's a fine line, because if we do that, then there's the expectation that we will, then we have to make sure that it meets public standards, and usually parking and access become a big challenge when you look at some of these smaller parks.
Okay, thanks, because I'm kind of looking along the lines of communication line. If we want to be able to leverage where we can, but I don't think that we have a way to do that. we don't have direct connections with the HOAs, for example, across Sammamish, to see where there's opportunity where there could be mutual benefit. And so it becomes its own thing to a certain extent. Right now, they just sort of exist. I'm trying to figure out, is there an opportunity to do more with it, to turn it into something?
Where some of the HOAs and the open space tracks really have value is in trail connectivity. So we are doing that with the new subdivisions. Every time the Community Development Department sees a subdivision, that they compare it with these trail maps that we have in the PROS plan. And so if they see that there's a potential trail connection, they flag it and they involve parks. And that is one place that we do get involved. Now, for existing subdivisions, it's, again, we look at our maps and it takes a lot of effort and we have to get easements granted.
Right.
But there is added value in working with HOAs for trail connectivity.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Yeah, I think this looks really great. I do like your breakout, kind of each park amenities that we have, and then hopes and dreams. I know I've heard from a future council member about bike racks at every park. I think it looks like there's only a few missing on this list, but definitely love that aspect of it, especially if we can get into rail connectivity. Yeah, I really like this. I like how it's laid out. I'm excited to kind of see what other public comment or any other input that we get, especially from both commissions. So I think it looks good. Yeah. Does council have anything else before we let them go? All good? Yeah. And thank you. Thanks for coming, Steve.
Yeah. Thank you, Council.
Yeah. All righty. Okay, we are going to transition to Mike for adopting the state legislative priorities for 2024. So I think we discussed these, was it a week ago? 2 weeks? Yeah, a week ago. I think while Mike gets set up, Scott might tee us up, it looks like.
I was just going to stall for time, Mayor, while Mike gets promoted and we swap the mics out. So bear with us for a moment.
Yes, thank you, Council, and good evening. Just give me one moment here while I get my bearings. This is the first time I've sat at this table in front of the Council, so it's a little bit different than what I'm used to. Okay. So my name is Mike Suggs, Supervising Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office. As Mayor Clark mentioned during your meeting last week, we did review a draft list of potential 2024 priorities. Council provided a lot of great feedback, and so staff and our lobbyists went back and looked at, what changes we could make. So in your packet tonight is an updated list of priorities attached to a resolution if Council's ready to adopt that tonight. I'll quickly run through the updates, which I can share on my screen here. The first one is relatively small. We just reordered the first item so that progressive revenue options comes before the 1% property tax cap item. The second is in response to Council's discussion on the WRAP Act. We introduced a new item here called reduced wasteful packaging. We revised the supporting item here on the back page titled Access to Behavioral Health Resources to better highlight the youth perspective. And this was in response to the Sammamish Youth Board memo asking Council to consider adding 2 new priorities that were based on the Washington Education Association's legislative agenda. The city manager emailed this memo to Council on Friday as part of this report. So if you had a chance to read that, you would recognize the language here. We also added a supporting issue titled Full Funding for Washington Public Schools, also in response to that same youth board memo. We removed the item previously titled Contain Rising City Insurance Costs to make room for the youth board's recommended addition. Our lobbyists will continue to monitor that item. It just won't be showing up on our legislative priorities. And finally, we added the Eastside Fire and Rescue as a named partner because, as Councilmember Howe noted, their legislative agenda closely aligns with ours, in particular the 1% property tax cap item. Additionally, just as a follow-up, at the last meeting, there was some discussion about the affordable housing near fixed route transit piece, which is one of our supporting issues, specifically about the definition of fixed route transit and how that compares to high capacity transit. I spoke with our community development department who's been tracking a lot of these bills, and what they told me is basically the definition of these terms depends on the bill's author. So there's really no standard definition in state law as to what these terms mean. But from our understanding, the intent of this priority, again, this language was provided by Arch verbatim, is to ensure that the right mix of housing types are built around transit so that there's equity and access to those transit options. Additionally, there was discussion about two bills relating to public safety. We had House Bill 1513, which would overhaul the circumstances under which a police officer can initiate a traffic stop. And then we also talked about House Bill 1445, which would expand the Attorney General Office authority to investigate law enforcement agencies. In talking with our lobbyists further, they do not recommend that we include these specifically on our legislative priorities at this time until council has had the opportunity to discuss the pros and cons of each, because there are a number of different provisions within each bill. But if council does have interest in continuing the conversation on those two bills, we can schedule it for an upcoming study session. I would also like to note, you may have noticed that the agenda bill in your packet appears to have mistakenly been copied over from the 14th. But the exhibit, which includes the priorities and the resolution, is up to date. So the reason I'm walking you through all these changes tonight is because I had that in the updated agenda bill, but it, for whatever reason, was replaced with the one from last week. So tonight we are recommending the council approve the resolution, which is included as Exhibit 1 to tonight's agenda bill. And once approved, our lobbyists will disseminate it to our legislative delegation in advance of our meeting with them on December 12th. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. And thank you for highlighting the differences. That's the easiest way for me. Council, I'll open it up to you for either comments, questions, discussion, or motion to approve this resolution. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, and Mike, I apologize. I thought I sent you the email, but I did that thing where I drafted the email and I never hit send. My only tiny thing is I would recommend, just based on having been down in Olympia, that we put the Endeavor project first on the first page. So it's really just moving the funding project first. That's probably the one that we're going to talk most specifically about, that they're going to ask most specifically about. So let's just put it there and get it out of the way. So I don't know if anybody else has comments. I can make a motion that we approve this legislative agenda with that one proposed geographical change.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that, or anyone have any other questions or comments?
I'm still disappointed that it doesn't spell Sam, but otherwise it's fine. Thanks, Mike. I know, I appreciate all the work that went into this. I know this is hard to distill it down, so thank you.
All right, all those in favor of adopting Resolution 2023-1026, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Alrighty, so by 6-0, we have lost one council member. That passes. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you, council.
All right, new business. Are you taking this, Scott? This is approving the City of Sammamish Fiscal Sustainability Plan through 2034.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Mike, just checking to make sure you're still able to help drive the...
Oops.
He's doing it from the back. He doesn't want to sit up front, which is very fair. So, Council, we are bringing the plan back because when the fiscal task force came to you all, one of the follow-ups was to say we'll come back after the budget and talk to you about what the plan looks like based on any budget action council might take. So with that, tonight we are discussing the fiscal sustainability plan for your consideration. Recall that the city's budget is structurally imbalanced. I think that we've discussed that previously, and that's a long-term look over time. The Community Task Force validated that we have a structural imbalance, and they presented their recommended approach on September 19th. when we are talking about developing a fiscal sustainability plan, we need to look at that 10-year planning horizon and recognizing that that planning horizon will roll year over year. So the precursor is we will come back and visit this every year we do the budget so that we can continue to be fiscally sustainable over a 10-year period. This mid-biennial budget adjustment, well, it says proposes, but council took action, so expenses reductions and other changes. And as I noted previously, it delayed the need for additional revenue by 3 years. So it moved the window out. This proposed plan addresses the structural imbalance over that 10-year period. And I want to jump into a couple of things before we get to the proposed changes. So this was the forecast as of council action this evening. This is where it moves the line out to. I think my very technical time period is 2030 and a half is technically when the reserve balance would cross over our strategic reserve. So the whole thing makes up our reserve at the moment, but that green line reflects where our what part of that amount is our reserve. So, however, it does note that we are continuing to use our reserves to fund ongoing operations, and that is the structural gap. So without taking any corrective action, and I appreciate the question previously during the budget about what does corrective action mean, that could mean either reductions or new revenues or both. So with that, just a couple of reminders about what contributes to the fiscal gap. It's a number of things. It's the 1% cap on the property tax, that the city has not utilized other available revenue options to date, that our remaining revenue sources grow by a modest 2 to 4% per year, and they are smaller than property tax. That our expenditures grow at over 4.4% per year. So it's not too hard to start figuring out that being capped at 1% for our primary source and inflation going up or expenditures going up over 4%, we're going to run into a problem. The other piece to remember as we go through this is that our capital improvement needs are still not funded under that baseline forecast. So we'll come back to that notion. So this is not unique to Sammamish, just so we're clear. This is all cities that revenue growth is systematically unable to keep pace with providing services. Every city and state in Washington, has this dilemma, and that cities with a more diversified revenue portfolio are more readily able to keep pace with inflation, but also run greater risk during recessions. So cities that rely more heavily on sales tax do worse during recessions based on those revenues coming in. So just a core piece. So how do we compare? So we are property tax as a percentage of our general fund. We are at 57%. And depending on the year, it goes a little higher or it goes a little lower, just depending. As you can see, our neighbors, our next closest neighbor to that is the city of Mercer Island, which in a lot of ways we are very reflective of. Relatively small commercial core, primarily residential, and on a bit of an island, if you will.
Maybe a little more literal.
Sales tax as a percentage of general fund. As you can see, our sales tax is also smaller than Mercer Island's in that regard. And in relation to our neighbors who have things like car dealerships and Costco's and Home Depots, you can see where those numbers differ a little bit. So heavily reliant on property tax, not very much in sales tax. So how do we compare to our surrounding cities? Other cities utilize additional revenue. Just for an example, you can see on there is the utility tax and the percentage of general fund revenue. So our next closest comparable, Mercer Island, is at a 13% rate. And we are the only city of our immediate neighbors that does not currently impose one. So how do we address fiscal sustainability? As I said previously, in order to maintain service levels, there's a number of different ways. And council's direction going into all of this was to maintain our service levels. So it's either revenue enhancements, expenditure controls, or service delivery alternatives. And so The task force came back and said, here's what we suggest you do or recommend you do. You take a look at revenue reductions as step one. Step two is the council implement councilmanic taxes, which in this case they recommended utility tax. And then they had voter responsibility, which was to get back to the conversation about a potential of a Metropolitan Parks District. So that was the task force recommendations ahead of council budget deliberation. So what does that look like before budget action? This is what that would look like. So in 2026, this would recommend council take action to implement the utility tax, and that would allow for the city to be sustainable over that time period. So for this proposed plan, it's modified. We're modifying that task force recommendation, recognizing their great work and rolling in where we are with the budget that council just adopted. So we are reducing expenditures sooner than recommended and at a higher level. They recommended $1 million over 3 years. We came up with $2.45 million in year one. And that equates to, as we discussed previously, 4% of the budget. It pushes out the timing of the utility tax from 2026 to 2028. And it potentially does not require the use of the Metropolitan Park District during the current 10-year planning horizon. However, we are recommending that council examine the timing and the size of the potential Metropolitan Park District during the next budget cycle, and we'll get to that in a moment. This plan also incorporates immediate infrastructure needs. We know that we have Fire Station 83 that is, council has already approved the planning dollars for that, and the next step would be we really need to get that construction going. The longer the delay, the more the cost goes up. Just time is money. In addition, there are some, there are some needs at City Hall in order to maintain one of our largest assets. Those need to be addressed in the near term. And so we're recommending that council approve the use of those out of fund balance to pay for those. It also delays addressing additional capital investments until next year when we take up the budget, because council and staff, we are looking at the comprehensive plan, which will include 20-year project lists for the larger chapters around transportation, parks, and our facilities. We would then have a 20-year look, and we would have a better sense of what are the capital needs moving forward. And then we can talk about how do those get funded. So to come back to the task force recommendation with the overlay, box number one, we've already taken it on and reduced the operating budget. Box number two, we are recommending that council look at utility taxes in 2029. And then again, box number three, we recommend that we come back and look at the timing of a potential Metro Parks District, with the inclusion of the Fire Station 83 at $9.4 million and City Hall investments at $1.95 million. And we will recommend highly to council that we come back and develop our capital plans and our funding strategy after we get that analysis completed. One of the things that we don't want to do is presuppose what those will be, and we think it prudent to come back when those councils had a chance to review those 20-year plans and provide feedback before we have that conversation. So what does that look like for the, sorry, I just had a total escape my mind for these graphs. What does it look like for the long-term look? The base forecast is on the left. That includes the mid-biennial adjustment, which is reductions in budget spending and projected underspend for the biennium. That gets us out to 2030. Adding the utility tax in 2029, you can see that it creates a fairly substantial revenue, a positive revenue gap. So the next step would be the two projects that I just mentioned. The City Hall project is concrete replacement, and that's actually the plaza out here. Yeah, there's leaking. It needs to be replaced. Flooring replacement and then the plumbing and the HVAC system are pretty old for this facility. And I will say that those dollar figures, that estimate for the HVAC is we currently use natural gas to run that. And so if we were to change that at council's direction, I think you might double that cost at a minimum. So just FYI. So what does that look like if we address our immediate needs? So on the left would be just adding the utility tax in 2029. On the right is the graph if you accommodate those two projects using fund balance and then add the utility tax. So you will notice that that line gets a little closer and it's a little tighter to where our strategic reserve is. And that's the piece that we'd like to come back when we revisit the biennial budget process to talk about what the right approach is moving forward to accommodate future capital needs. Go ahead, Mike. So those would include asset preservation as a part of this. It's not just City Hall. As has been discussed previously, the city owns the Central Washington building, which our lease says that we maintain all of it. We own the Boys and Girls Club. And as we bring new facilities online, we also have to be able to maintain those facilities over time. So we have transportation capital. We know we have some big projects that we don't have a lot of funding sources for. We have parks. You heard about some of them. Some of these you will notice in the 6-year PROS plan are still not addressed financially because there's not funding for it. Our facilities, we just purchased a site for a potential future South Maintenance and Operations Center. However, what that looks like and what those needs are and what the cost is, we're still working out. So we'll be coming back to you with what that looks like. And then we'll need renovations to things like Beaver Lake Lodge, other components of City Hall, et cetera. So as part of maintaining our assets over time, we think we should be doing a little bit more about setting money aside year over year and addressing things when they need to before they become full capital replacement. So we'll be coming back to you all with a plan this next year for that. And the great unknown, which is the Climate Action Plan. We know there's going to be a lot of interest in a lot of projects that come out of that. We don't know exactly what those costs are going to be, but we know we need to start accommodating those. And so that has to be part of that planning horizon. We're hopeful that when we get a little farther into the year, we will know more and have a better sense of what those are. So go ahead, Mike. So the next step is that we recommend that we postpone for now the Metropolitan Parks District and come back during the 25-26 budget cycle after we have looked at these plans and have a better sense, and then talk about what the planning horizon is potentially for the Metro Parks District. And then the final next steps, is that this is a living document. And one of the reasons that our recommendation is council just approve this by motion is we want to make sure that this document can be amended as we learn new things and as we get new information. So if the economy does much better moving forward, we might potentially make some changes accordingly. If it does substantially worse, we might have to do something different. But at a minimum, we would come back with each budget cycle and review the plan and the 10-year horizon to make sure we're still on track and we are fiscally sustainable. So the takeaways from this plan is that we have a plan that has us being fiscally sustainable over that 10-year planning horizon, and that we have some things that we need to look at in the future about it, that we need to address and accommodate those moving forward. So with that, apologize for continuing to talk, but I will turn it over, Mayor, and for questions from the group.
Next steps.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that again. Councilmember Howe?
Thank you. So my question has to do specifically with the utility tax. So I do believe that over time we are probably going to have to do something like utility tax. I don't think we escape that. My question has to do with the 6%. Could it be stair-stepped? And also, can we find a way to accommodate those of lesser income, seniors? from what I understand from just reading the document, it looked like that could be a hit to the projected number of $1 million, maybe $3 million. It could really damage what you're trying to put forward here in terms of that crossover. It would make that line, a lot closer. But that's where I'm going to stop. I'll let you answer.
Sure, and appreciate the question, Councilmember Howe. I think what I would say is, before we'd ever get to one of these decision points, there's a lot of research that we need to do before we would ever get to an actual decision. And that's one of the pieces we would take council direction when we got to that point to say, what do you want us to try to accommodate as part of that when we get there? And then we would update the model accordingly.
Okay, because I think that's what I'm looking for is a lot more of a slider, again, a manual control that tells us the good, the bad, the ugly, and to see where reduction in services is appropriate in order for us to make up a difference, for example, because that's a trade-off I want to be able to do. So I want to understand from this potential motion tonight, is this something that, just holds us that we are going to do utility tax? It will be 6%? Or...
Well, bear in mind, Councilmember, and I appreciate the question, that the reason why I'm saying this is a living document is that, first off, this council can't tie any future council to a decision point. So this is a guide for your future selves, if you will. And that when we get to that point, this is the recommendation that the plan lays out. If council chooses at that point in time to say, here is direction that we would like to look at X or Y or Z, or a sliding scale or a lower rate, that you can revise the plan accordingly when we get to that point. I think that's the part we'd like to really keep in mind here, is that this is the plan to say this is a snapshot in time right now, and that we'll retake that snapshot every year as we take budget action. And I say we, forgive me, I mean you all, as you take budget action, that we would update and you would take a look at that. So next year during the biennial budget process, you would look out and say, right time, right amount? Do we update? We'll update the plan if we want to make a change.
And just my final question around this has to do with the utilities themselves. At what point can they bring up a barrier or a blockade to forward momentum on something?
Well, Councilmember Howe, if we impose the utility tax, it's their obligation to implement that.
Correct, but they're also the ones that receive the funding, which means that if we wanted to push something like, for example, a reduction for seniors, for example, they have to do it unless we add staff to do it ourselves. Would that be fair?
Yes, we would in all likelihood have to do that ourselves on our end.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I don't know that we even need a motion, because I do think this is more of a plan for a plan, right? We don't have, for example, there's not even a what the per capita tax would be for the utility tax, right? We don't have any of those estimates. I really appreciate all the work that went into this, so we know that we have a plan if we need it, right? 6 years out. But I don't even want to pass a motion, because I guarantee you we're going to make different decisions next year. So in like 8 months, or 9 months, we're going to make some different decisions around the budget, because what's the timing on Fire Station 83 and the City Hall updates, those big capital investments that need to happen? Is that next year? Is that 2025, 27?
Those would be in the 25-26 biennium.
Okay, so they would be in that budget period. So we still could make a different decision on how we want to fund those, right? As we look at, when we're looking at those, in addition to all the other 20-year plans, we may want to say, hey, let's deal with our capital projects in a whole different way. And if that's the case, then maybe we don't have to implement 6% in that time frame. It's, to Councilmember Howe's point of view, we can stair step it. We can bring it on more slowly, maybe at a different time. And I still want us to look at, I don't remember, and I apologize, but I don't remember us saying we didn't want to look at any service level reductions. I thought we kind of had let's look at some of the big ticket items that we provide, and is there a way to look at what would the next tier down of service level be, and how much would we save? It may not be worth it. It may not be a big enough dollar, but because that 4.4% increase is generally, right now, I think, mostly from inflation, right? It's not even the increases that Anjali talked about. As we bring on more parks, we're going to need to bring on more staff. So that 4.4% is just our baseline going up because of inflation. We're going to have to probably continue to look at potential areas where, hey, we have more parks and that's awesome. Maybe we can find ways to maintain them, but maybe not quite as expensively, right? We can find something like that because I think we're going to have to do both of those things. So I'm not really comfortable committing to, we're not looking at service level reductions at all. I'm not even comfortable saying that we're going to fund Fire Station 83 and the City Hall repairs from the operations budget. I'm comfortable saying that if we don't have another plan for you, we will, because we know we need to do those. And I think for the maintenance stuff, right, there's a study that you guys are still doing. So we're still going to get that back and see what kind of big price tag we have in addition to what we're going to do with our new property. There might be even more of that. So I like it as it is. I don't know that we need a motion because I think anything we pass in a motion is, we might maybe in 6 years implement a 6% utility tax, but probably not. We're probably going to be doing something completely different next year. So I don't really want to make that motion. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Councilmember. It really is council's choice about whether or not you want to sort of bless it, if you will, or just have it as a working document. It's entirely up to you all. I mean, this is really a way to show that because we do have that structural imbalance, that there is at least a plan to keep us in the good for the 10-year period. And then there are a lot of decisions to make down the road. And that is absolutely true. There's a lot of decisions still to be made. But I think for right now, it was important for us to go through that process and to get to a point to say, I do want to highlight this, the task force did some really heavy lifting. And they, as the community said, they looked at potential, again, this is building on their work on potential reductions, and they collectively said, no, actually, we like the service levels where they are, and their conversation was, we're willing to pay for those. So, and that's again, that's a snapshot in time as well. So this is building on that work. You all have the choice to look at it and say, great, to pass it by motion if you want to do that. If not, it's a working document that we'll continue to utilize and bring back as we have these decisions either way, because I think it's a good planning tool to make sure that we are looking out into the future and trying to address what we know is, and everybody has, is this structural gap. Just anecdotally, we've had communities around us turn over their fire departments to EFR. We've had them join South Regional System because that's the way they came up with to pay for their fire station, or go out for a levy lid lift for the Delta and police services. So every community around us is going through some version of this about saying, how do we continue to provide our services given that our main revenue source is shrinking in essence while everything else is going up.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So I'm fine with not adopting this plan and just considering this as a working document. But if we do, I think that we should capture all of our feedback, which includes what Councilmember Howe was talking about, having utility, having the assistance for the lower income people. And I just want to point out that the utility tax is a regressive tax, and the taxes that are in the contingency strategies, which is the admissions tax for the golf course, is a progressive tax. And I firmly do believe that should be a priority strategy. And the economic development plan could also move up. Those are taxes that are not taxes on our residents. And so I would like to see those move up. And I'd also like to add a commercial vacancy tax. We don't know how much money we would bring in for that. But again, that is another progressive tax, which we are not taxing our residents. That would be on the management companies, which are primarily out of state. We have it in our council priorities, or our legislative priorities, that we're directing our legislators to prioritize progressive revenue options, but yet here we are proposing only regressive taxes as a priority strategy. Seattle is considering a high-end capital gains tax to add on to the 7% capital gains tax. That's over $250,000. They're re-looking at that at the end of the month. I was chatting with the council member that's proposing it, and so they'll have more information by the end of the month. So we can always consider that next year. But I do think that if we want to consider this as a working document, and the working document is a snapshot in time for right now, that all the information or all the feedback that we're providing now is captured, so that next year when we come back, we'll be able to have pretty easily all the information that we provided. But great job.
Councilmember Napure.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I like the idea of having it as a working document too. And I think, Scott, earlier you mentioned, levels of service. I think that came from that task force. I think that was very loud and clear that the folks who were serving on that, they felt very strongly about not reducing the level of service in our city. When the task force was considering different taxes, did they consider like some of these progressive tax options, or was utility tax the only one that was considered?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. The answer is yes, all of those were on the table, metaphorically, if you will. I think one of the reasons that they came to what they came to is that I think the term was, rather than sort of a death by 1,000 cuts, they were recommending taking, three big actions, which is why you got the three steps, rather than several multiple steps that even still, those smaller ones still don't get you to where you need to be. And I think it was one of the task force members gave a pretty impressive this is my thought process about how to get there, and brought the task force along at that point. So I think all these things are certainly options. I think their strategy, if you will, was to take three big steps as opposed to a whole bunch of small ones.
And there's no plan to regroup this task force or create another one in the near future. Is that a correct statement?
No, not at all. I think from my perspective, I thought it was a really amazing process to be a part of. I think there's always an option down the road. I think if and when we take a look at a Metro Parks District, I think that would be a great time to reform or add new, if you will, to take a look at that when we get to that point in time. And any other time council feels that it would make sense to do that. I think, again, getting the community. One of the pieces about the task force that I was really blown away by is that we had people volunteer that had never touched government at all before, and they jumped in and gave us that feedback. So I think it was a really positive outcome and a way to get a sense of where the community is before the council takes major decision points like that.
Yeah, because I think our demographic, is changing in the city, and so will our outlook to how we want to manage our finances for the city. So I know our city doesn't have like an economic development officer or, anything like that, but in case if we cannot get this task force together in the next 5 or 6 years, I think it would be still great to get these kind of recommendations from the staff as well, just, through their own research or through conferences that you go to, because I think we always need to be thinking about these different ideas on how cities are sort of, funding themselves too.
It's very front of mind, so I appreciate that, council member. We're definitely on the lookout for ways to be innovative, ways to partner, ways to try to mitigate some of the costs as we go, recognizing that there is no magic endless pot of money, and we have to be prudent with everything that we do to try to get the most out of our dollars.
So when we get the monthly report, can some of these items be included in that report? So what I'm also wondering along those lines is, if we had passed this in a motion, maybe you would have, it would be tied very tightly to the budget updates that we would do. But if we don't pass it as a motion, when this is a working document, but when does it get brought in front of the council, right? Like, we don't want it to be just like a working document which the staff works on, but to be brought out to the public, and so we can have our discussion. So would that be tied to a particular cadence?
I think the cadence would more be wrapped around when something significant is changing or we're projecting it to change. And by that, I mean either revenues, we're projecting revenues, and generally we do those once a year in anticipation of the budget. And then obviously with budget action comes choices and decisions to make. So that's the natural piece, but that doesn't mean that we can't come in and say, we can look at actuals, which again are, budgeted or projected versus actuals. We can bring in and look at actuals, and I know that's part of the FMR now is our, what we're receiving, but recognizing that a lot of those get skewed because we get property taxes twice a year. So the whole thing gets kind of thrown off when you're looking at month over month, because you'll see blip, 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 and then a big chunk, and then we're back to the, more of the. So we can work on ways to make the FMR to get some more data out there for council, and then quite frankly, it's really kind of for council. If we want to take a look at and review, quarterly or something like that, we can bring up and take a look. But most of that model will be reflective of big changes, because once the budget is set and our projections are set, we're probably not going to come back and change anything because the budget is set. So that's why that's a natural time, point in time to come with a proposed budget.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Before I go to round two for some hands I'm seeing, I think I'm struggling a little bit because I thought the whole point of the financial or the fiscal sustainable task force was to actually get some guideposts written down, have a plan. I don't know. For me, I'm like, okay, so we had them cram in all of these hours and meetings all summer, and then we're like, we'll leave it as a working document that the city manager can bring back annually, or sometimes we can pull out. So I'm struggling a little bit, but obviously doing the math, since we only have 6, it sounds like 3 are uninterested in having this as a passing plan. So I'm not really sure what to do here, but I wish we could have passed it, because I think it's, even though it changes, even though things move, even though, however often we review it, at least it's something that council has taken, passed a motion, our residents have vetted it, and we have at least something in the future. So I don't know. So is this round 2 for hands? Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I appreciate your concern, Mayor. I just think if we're going to pass it as a plan, it should have a longevity of at least a year. I don't want to have to pass something that I know isn't what we're going to do. And I actually think that what we're absolutely not going to do is a 6% utility tax all at once 6 years from now, because I think there are a lot of other actions we're going to take. And I think that the task force gave us great ideas. I think it gave us the ability to look at the model and say, we have a soft landing should we need it. I do think, and I appreciate we don't want to do a bunch of things, let's just do a couple, but I do think, Deputy Mayor Lamb brings up some really great points, that there are some progressive things we could do, and we could do them sooner. They might not generate as much, but if we start them sooner, then they generate revenue. There's also a lot of levers to pull as we look towards next year. We currently fund our parks through REIT. We have flexibility on what we use that REIT for. So if we investigate a metropolitan park district sooner rather than later, which is what the task force had recommended, we could potentially pay for that with part of the REIT, and then we might even be able to reallocate some of that additional REIT for other things, potentially other capital projects, et cetera. So I think there's still a lot more exploring to do before we lock into a plan, because it's hard to do something and then go undo it. And so that's my fear, is passing a plan that we know we can't really stick to. But I like having it as a working document. Maybe it should be part of the budget. Maybe it's something that we should pass with the budget, and it comes with the budget. And then we have a materiality threshold that if there are any changes above that materiality threshold, we come back with and see what it does to that graph, and if we have to make any changes and pull any different levers. So that would be my recommendation, is to tie it to the budget with a materiality threshold, that anytime there's any decision we have to make that crosses that, we have to relook at the fiscal sustainability plan. Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
I was trying to understand what the advantage was to making this motion, because I wasn't quite sure what we were agreeing to. So that's where I was uncomfortable. However, I do completely understand the point of big aggressive move, make a big difference. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get there. You're just not going to get there. We are going to do utility tax. I don't know when, and I don't know how much, but we are, because we're going to have to. So, I mean, I think part of it is it's too specific, not specific enough. So it's this funny, mushy ground for me, and that's where I get derailed. I have a deep concern that this document will go into the deep freeze. It will not be a living document. It will be ignored. And I don't want that to happen. And it's not just because I want to respect the work that was done. It's because I think it would work. I think it would work. But does it have to be a motion? Does it have to be now? Could it just be a motion to just say that we must do this type of planning in such a way to make, drastic changes to the way that we generate revenue here?
Absolutely. So, Councilmember Howe, you raise these are great points. One of the things that I might suggest is we do have financial policies. One thing that we could do is adopt these as part of financial policies that get updated as part of our financial policies, because we actually, as part of the budget process, we also adopt financial policies. You all amended it to 2 weeks ago, to adopt the change in the strategic reserve. So we could make updating the plan part of that process.
Well, and if it could be something that continues to get developed, and I'd like to know who would be responsible for that, but developed in such a way, thank you, that lets me have that lever to understand, okay, we need to move that up sooner. Okay, this new legislation just came through, now we can add that piece, so that it really doesn't just fall apart.
Appreciate that, Councilmember. And we have no intention of letting it fall apart, because this is really part of having the model, is being able to really look out and plan for the future, recognizing that there are a lot of assumptions built in, but they are legitimate, reasonable assumptions. And so then if we change something significantly, to your point, then we'll be able to see what the impact is. And I think that's our goal as a planning tool, is that we're going to be using this internally regardless to help us make recommendations to you all about actions that you might take. Again, how council chooses to recognize this, I think we could make it as part of we could bring it back as part of the financial policies. We can bring it back next year as part of financial policies, as part of the budget process. There are options.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
So I could pass this plan, just not this plan. Like, it would need more work. And I understand that at some point we're going to have the utility tax, but in good conscience, I can't justify that we're going to tax our residents only and not consider the non-residents. And it just doesn't. It's not right. I mean, I don't know. It's just not right. And regardless how little it brings in, it may only be a couple $1 million, but we just can't tax our residents and not tax the people that live outside. And so, like I said, I can pass a plan, but not this plan.
All right. Did anyone else have any questions, thoughts from council? All right, Scott. Yeah.
As clear as mud, as they say, Mayor. Here's what I would like to suggest for council's consideration. I think some of these pieces will require a little bit more work, to Deputy Mayor Lamb's point. So perhaps what we need to do is to have it as a work plan item for this next year, to look at some of these pieces early in the year, and with the understanding that we're going to come back as part of the budget process and roll this in some form or another into our financial policies, to say that we take this look every year as part of the budget, and that this is part of our planning process. So if that makes sense to council, that's a path forward that doesn't sort of splits the difference, if you will.
I appreciate it. I knew we hired you for a good reason. So thank you. And thank you, obviously, I don't know, probably Mike made the slide deck. It was great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a report?
I do, just very, very quickly, Mayor, just a reminder. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and reminder, City Hall is closed on Thursday and Friday. I want to remind that Friday is Shop Small Business, as we heard previously, and to encourage everyone to shop Sammamish. We'll start it now. And just to remind everyone, the City Hall is closed both of those days.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Farrell, did you have... I thought there was something, another report, or, Councilmember Ndupure?
I just wanted to mention something for good of the order. I think the first thing I wanted to mention is, I know we had a public comment from the youth board asking for like specific seats on the commissions. I don't think we have any restrictions right now, right? I know I see a lot of open positions right now, so if some of our students are interested, they can apply for these positions, correct?
They can, council member. I think the challenges, and one of the reasons they were suggesting one-year terms, is that the positions right now are 3-year terms. And that's a little bit challenging for those that might be, I don't know, heading out of here to college in the not too distant future. So we're working on that on with the boards and commissions to see if we can find a path forward that gets to that.
I mean, they could still apply, even if it's a 3-year term, serve that 1 year, and then be out. So I just want to make sure that they know that, and then our youth board coordinator can convey that message. Great. And then the second thing I just want to say is thank you so much for all the wonderful gifts, compliments, and thank you for that opportunity, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and the council, for letting me apply to this position. It really, of course, I've been here, a resident of the city for a very long time, but just the fact of me being on the council not only impacted, my community here, but also all the way in India. You cannot imagine how proud folks were that somebody from their city, from their village, went and serves on the government. And it was a great education for them as well. And to be able to carry on my grandmother's legacy of serving. I think, she herself was not educated. I think in our family, I'm the second generation who's gone to school and college. Just to see that how much difference, one position can make. So I just, again, want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me serve our community. And I'll be still around.
Well, thank you. I mean, we can go till 10 p.m. if you want to stay. I don't want you to miss out. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So there's SCA board elections, and we need somebody to attend the meeting where they're voting. December 13th, and I believe it's from 5:30 to 6:30. Is there anybody that? Just need one person.
I'll do it if you want.
Okay.
Everybody can go, though.
Yeah.
So everybody can go.
They just need one voting member.
Is it a dinner again? Or is
I
it
don't think
virtual?
so. It's just virtual.
It's virtual,
Yeah.
okay. They used to be dinners, so it was fun. In the before times.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. And so, Councilmember Stewart, you are the voting member. All right. I think with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All righty. Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.